The waitress who walked into the lion's den and made the lions kneel. They thought she was nobody. A quiet girl in a black apron carrying their wine, refilling their water, invisible between the chandeliers. The most feared man in the city invited her to his gala as a joke, a little entertainment for his powerful friends. But when those doors opened that night, the woman who walked in didn't just silence the room. She made an empire tremble, because the waitress they'd been underestimating for years had a secret so dangerous it could bring all of them to their knees. Before we begin, if you love stories where the underestimated rise and the arrogant fall, please hit that like button and follow the channel so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me, which city are you watching from tonight? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to see how far this story travels across the world. Now, lean in close. Turn the lights down, because tonight you're about to meet Lena Hart. The rain had been falling on Ashford Bay for 3 days straight, the kind of rain that didn't so much fall as press, against windows, against coats, against the back of your neck when you stepped outside for a second and regretted it. By 8 o'clock Thursday night, the sidewalks along Harrow Street were slick black mirrors, and the neon from the pharmacy across the way bled into the puddles like something wounded. Inside Marin's, none of that mattered. Marin's was the kind of restaurant that didn't have a sign out front. If you didn't know what the brass M on the door meant, you weren't meant to know. The walls were dark oak. The lighting was low and warm, the color of aged whiskey. A pianist in the corner played something old and slow that nobody was listening to, but everybody felt. And the guests were the sort of people who ordered $30 martinis without looking at the menu and tipped in $100 bills like they were shaking dust off their coats. Lena Hart moved between their tables like a shadow with a tray. She was 26 years old. Dark hair pulled back so tight it gave her a small headache by the end of every shift. A black shirt, black slacks, a white cloth folded over her left arm, exactly the way Mr. Calder insisted. No makeup beyond a swipe of something brown across her eyelids, because Mr. Calder had once told her, in the kindly, cruel voice managers use when they're firing somebody, "Sweetheart, the guests come here to look at each other, not at the help." She had learned to be the help. She had learned to be so still, so quiet, so practiced that the men at table 9 could discuss the insider trade they were about to execute and never once lower their voices when she refilled their glasses. She had learned that invisibility was its own kind of armor. It kept you safe, it kept you fed. And after everything, after the years she did not talk about, the work she did not talk about, the names she had erased from her passports and her resumes, and some nights, from her own memory, safe and fed was enough. It had to be. "Lena." The voice came from behind her, low and tight. Sasha, another server, passing with a tray of empty glasses. "Calder wants you on the private room, table 2. Lena paused. "I'm covering the floor tonight. Marcus has the private rooms." Marcus got sent home, cut his hand open on a bread knife. "Then put Danny in there. Danny's smoking in the alley and crying about her boyfriend again." Sasha's eyes flicked up, met hers for a heartbeat. There was something in them Lena didn't quite like. Pity, maybe, or warning. "It's a Vescari party, Lena." Lena went very still. She had been doing this job for almost 2 years, and in 2 years she had learned all the names that mattered in Ashford Bay. The judges, the developers, the senator's wife who came in every Friday with a different man, and the Vescaris, especially the Vescaris. "How many at the table?" "4. Him and 3 of his." Sasha's voice dropped. Calder said specifically, "You," said, "You don't spook." "You don't spook?" Lena almost laughed. If Mr. Calder only knew. She checked her reflection in the small mirror behind the service station. Her face was neutral. It was always neutral. She had practiced this face in 100 airports, in embassies in cities she could no longer name out loud, in waiting rooms where the wrong twitch of an eyebrow could cost lives. A waitress's smile was nothing. A waitress's composure was child's play. "Fine," she said. "Tell him I'm on it." The private room at Marin's was behind a set of double doors, carved with some old coat of arms nobody remembered the meaning of. Lena pushed them open with her shoulder, tray balanced against her hip, and stepped inside. 4 men. Just as Sasha had said. 3 of them, she clocked in half a second. Muscle. Expensive suits cut a little loose around the shoulders so the hardware underneath wouldn't print. One of them, the oldest, had a scar under his jaw that ran like a pale comma down into his collar. Another kept his hands on the table at all times, flat, palms down. A man who had once been trained not to reach too fast. The fourth man was Roman Whisperer. She had never seen him in person before. Photographs in the local paper didn't do him justice, and the local paper was careful about the photographs it ran. In person, he was quieter than she expected. Not quieter in voice. She hadn't heard his voice yet. Quieter in the way certain animals are quiet. The way a wolf doesn't waste movement. He was maybe 40, maybe a hard-earned 45, with black hair going silver at the temples and a face that looked like it had been cut from something colder than flesh. Dark eyes. A mouth that probably remembered how to smile but didn't bother tonight. He looked up when she came in, and for one unguarded second, a second Lena almost missed because she was focused on the bottle in her hand. Those dark eyes paused on her. Not the way men's eyes usually paused on women. Not that. It was the way a man pauses when something doesn't fit the shape of the room. When a piece of furniture has been moved. When a bird has flown into a window. Then it was gone. He looked back down at his glass. "Gentlemen," Lena said. Her voice was warm, professional, nothing. "I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I open the Barolo, or would you prefer—" "The Barolo is fine." Roman's voice, when it came, was low and smoke-roughened and utterly without curiosity. He didn't look up. She opened the bottle with practiced hands, poured a measure into his glass first, by protocol. Waited. He didn't taste it, didn't acknowledge it. She poured the others. The conversation had stopped when she walked in, the way conversations always did in private rooms. She was used to that. She began to retreat toward the door. "Girl." It was the man with the scar who spoke. Older, heavier. His accent was something Eastern that had been sanded down by decades in America, but not quite sanded off. He was looking at her with frank, appraising amusement, the way a man might look at a horse he didn't intend to buy. "Sir? How long you been working here?" "About 2 years, sir." 2 years. He glanced at Roman. 2 years and we never saw her. You hiding pretty girls in the back, Calder? Mr. Calder, Lena knew with a sinking feeling, was not in the room. The man was speaking rhetorically, performing for his boss. Her jaw stayed soft. Her eyes stayed down. "Anything else for the table, sir?" "She's shy." The scarred man laughed. A wet sound. "Roman, look, she's shy." Roman Viscari lifted his head, and this time he did look at her. Really look. And Lena, who had once sat across a table from a warlord in a country whose name she would not speak aloud, who had negotiated the release of 12 people from a compound that was on fire at the time, who had learned a long time ago how not to flinch, felt something small and cold move up her spine. Because he wasn't looking at her the way the scarred man was. He was looking at her like he was trying to solve a problem. "What's your name?" Roman said. "Lena, sir." "Lena what?" A beat, the smallest beat. "Heart. Heart." He repeated it softly, rolled it around in his mouth like he was tasting the wine he hadn't tasted yet. "You don't look like a waitress, Lena Hart." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir." One corner of his mouth moved. It was almost a smile. It was not a smile. "Don't be sorry." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The man with the flat hands tensed minutely. She caught it, because she had been trained years ago to catch things like that, and then relaxed when he saw what Roman was pulling out. It was an envelope, heavy cream paper, wax seal, black. He set it on the edge of the table, slid it 2 inches toward her with one finger. "Saturday night," he said, "the Corvell Hotel, 9th floor, 9 o'clock. Lena did not pick it up. "Sir, I think there's been a—" "There hasn't." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I want you to come. You'll be my guest. Wear something you don't own yet. Buy it tomorrow. Send the bill to the concierge. They'll know who you are." The scarred man let out a low, delighted whistle. "Boss?" Roman ignored him. His eyes hadn't left Lena's face. "Is that a problem, Lena Hart?" She understood in that moment with the dreadful clarity that comes to a person who has been here before, who has stood in a room where someone with power is offering her something that isn't an offer. That saying no was not one of the options on the table. Not tonight, not in this room, with these 3 men between her and the door, with the mortgage on her mother's old house, with her little brother Theo waiting at home for his big sister to come back and make him grilled cheese at midnight because nothing else in the kitchen would do. Not a refusal. Not a yes either. Something in between. "May I ask why, sir?" There it was again. That thing at the corner of his mouth that wasn't a smile. "Because I'm curious," he said, "and I don't get curious often." He lifted his glass, finally tasted the wine, set it down. "The envelope is yours. Take it or leave it on the table. I won't ask twice." She stood there for maybe 3 seconds. It felt like 3 minutes. Then she reached out and picked up the envelope and slid it into the pocket of her apron, the way she might have slipped a receipt from a tip, and she said, "Thank you for dining with us tonight, gentlemen. I'll be back with the second course." And she walked out. She did not let the door close behind her before she started breathing again. The kitchen at Marin's was a storm. It always was. Flames behind the line, someone swearing in Spanish about a duck breast, the dishwasher hissing, Mr. Calder's voice barking somewhere near the expediting pass. Lena walked through it like she was walking underwater. She made it to the narrow back hall where the servers kept their bags. She pushed the staff door open and stepped out into the rain. The alley smelled like wet brick and cigarette smoke. Danny was out there, red-eyed, still on her phone, pretending she wasn't crying. Lena ignored her, walked to the other end of the alley, leaned her forehead against the cold wall. The envelope was still in her apron pocket. She could feel its corners through the fabric. "Jesus," she whispered. Then, because she wasn't going to do this, not here, not now, not with 8 more tables to turn and a walk-in freezer's worth of bread to slice and a whole shift between her and a hot shower. She pulled her shoulders back, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and went back inside. Theo was on the couch when she finally got home. It was almost 2 in the morning. The apartment was small. 3 rooms, a stove that only worked on 2 burners, a window that looked out at the brick wall of the building next door. It smelled like the lemon cleaner Lena used on Sundays, and tonight, like the cheap frozen pizza Theo had clearly microwaved and ruined around 11. He was 17, all elbows and hoodie and bad posture. He had been asleep, or pretending to be asleep, when she keyed open the door, but he sat up when he heard her, rubbing his face. "You're late." "Bar was busy." She hung her coat. "Did you eat?" "I ate." He was staring at her. "You look weird." "Thanks." "No, like, weird. Did something happen?" Lena opened her mouth to say no out of habit. Then she closed it. She sat down on the arm of the couch. She pulled the envelope out of her bag. Theo stared at it. "What is that?" "An invitation." "To what?" "A gala." He sat all the way up. "A what?" "Saturday night, 9th floor of the Corvell Hotel." "The Corvell? Like the Corvell? Like the one where they charge you $20 for a bottle of water in the lobby?" "That one." "Who invited you?" Lena hesitated. "A customer." Theo's eyes narrowed. He was 17 and he was her mother's son, which meant he could smell a half-truth at 50 paces. "What customer?" "Theo." "Lena." "What customer?" She turned the envelope over in her hands. Black wax seal. A crest she didn't recognize and suspected didn't exist except for the purposes of intimidation. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. "Roman Vescari." There was a very long pause. Theo had only lived in Ashford Bay for 3 years. She had brought him here when their mother got sick, and he had stayed after their mother died. But even 3 years was enough to know that name. He knew it the way kids at his school knew it, whispered in hallways. He knew it the way bodega owners knew it, when they paid their envelope on the 1st of every month. He knew it the way Lena, who had seen much worse men in much worse places, had known it the second Sasha spoke it in the kitchen hallway. "Lena." His voice cracked. "Lena, no. I know. You can't go. I know." "Then why are you holding it like that?" "I'm not holding it like anything. You're holding it like you're going." She looked at him. Really looked at him. Her little brother, skinny, acne on his chin, a hole in the sleeve of his hoodie that their mother would have stitched the moment she saw it. 17 years old, and he had already buried both his parents, and now his sister was sitting across from him with a Mafia boss's invitation in her hand. "I'm not going," she said softly. But if I don't go, Theo, he's not going to just forget he asked. So we leave. We can't leave. We can. We go to Aunt Celia in Theo, gently. We can't leave. My name is on the lease, on your school, on Mom's grave. We're not running anywhere. He was quiet. Then he said in a voice much older than 17, You used to run. She looked at him sharply. I wasn't supposed to say that. He looked down at his hands. I know you don't like to talk about before. I know, but Lena, you used to be somebody else. You used to be somebody. And you came home and you got small. You got really small. And I watched you do it. And I didn't say anything because Mom was dying and you were all I had. But you got small, Lena, and I don't want you to die small. The silence in the apartment was enormous. Lena felt something hot press behind her eyes and refused to let it out. She had not cried in 4 years. She was not starting tonight. I didn't get small, she said. The words came out rougher than she meant. I got careful. There's a difference. Okay. There's a difference, Theo. Okay, Lena. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of tap water she didn't want. She drank it anyway. Behind her, quiet, Theo said, You know what scares me? What? It's not that he invited you. It's that you're not scared. She set the glass down. She had not told him, of course. She had not told him about the years before their mother got sick. She had not told him about the cities whose names she wouldn't say, the names on her old passports, the envelopes she used to carry that did not have wax seals on them, but did, one time, have a vial of anti-serum inside that kept 140 children alive through a night she did not think about anymore. She had not told him that when she looked at Roman Vescari tonight, across the low light of that private room, what she had felt. Under the fear, yes. There was always fear. Fear was information, was something more dangerous than fear. Recognition. Not of him. She had never met him. Of the room, of the shape of the game, of the weight of the envelope in her hand. It had been a long time since she had held an envelope like that. And some part of her, the part she had spent 4 years putting to sleep, the part she had buried under black aprons and tight ponytails and the invisible good manners of a good waitress, had opened its eyes in that private room tonight and said very softly, Oh, hello, old friend. She was, she realized, not scared. That was the problem. She didn't sleep. She lay on her back in her narrow bed and listened to Theo's breathing through the thin wall, and she watched the streetlight through the blinds make slow white bars across the ceiling, and she thought she could not run. Running was the answer of a woman with nothing. She had a brother. She had a grave to visit on Sundays. She had a life, small as it was, and she had built it with her own hands out of the wreckage of the life she had left behind, and she was not going to set it on fire because a man in a private room had looked at her with the wrong kind of attention. She could not refuse. Refusal, with men like that, was a door slammed in the face of a wolf. It made the wolf curious. It made the wolf come back. She could go. She could go and be exactly what he expected. A shy waitress in a borrowed dress, eyes down, flattered and confused, easy to bore and easy to dismiss. He would look at her for 10 minutes and move on to the next shiny thing, and she would go home and this would all be over. Or she rolled onto her side, or she could go and be someone else, not someone new. That was the thing Theo had almost understood and hadn't quite. She didn't need to become anyone new. She had for 4 years been pretending, badly on some nights, beautifully on most, to be a woman she was not. A quiet waitress, a small life, a folded napkin. She could, for one night, stop pretending. She could walk into that ballroom the way she had once walked into rooms where generals were waiting to sign agreements they did not want to sign. She could wear her spine the way she had once worn it, when she had been, God, it had been a long time since she had let herself think the word, when she had been Lena Hart, attaché, field coordinator, woman with a satellite phone and a steady hand. Not Lena Hart, the waitress. Lena Hart, the woman who, at 23, had walked out of a burning consulate with 3 sealed diplomatic pouches and a 9-year-old girl on her hip and had not broken stride until she reached the airstrip. She had sworn, the day she came home, that she was done with that woman. That woman had gotten her mother's last 2 years. That woman had missed Theo's graduation from 8th grade. That woman had made it possible for a lot of people to live, and had not always made it possible for herself to live with who she had become. She had put that woman to sleep. Now a man she did not know, for reasons she did not yet understand, was asking her to wake that woman up for one night. Lena stared at the ceiling. The streetlight bars shifted slowly across it. "One night," she whispered. She spent Friday pretending everything was normal. She made Theo eggs. She walked him to the bus stop, even though he was 17 and hated it. She went to Marin's and took a double shift because Mr. Calder offered it and because money was money. She served a birthday party of 8, a sommelier's dinner of 4, 2 couples on separate tables who were probably having the same affair. She did not look at the private room. She did not ask who was in it. At 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, she took the bus downtown. She did not go to the concierge at the Corvelle. She did not send any bill to anyone. She was not going to walk into Roman Viscari's gala wearing a dress he had bought her. That was a leash, and she had not worn a leash in her life, and she was not going to start now. She went instead to a small consignment shop on Wren Street that she had walked past 100 times and never entered. It was the kind of place that got estate sale clothes from the old families up on the ridge, gowns that had been worn once, at weddings or at charity balls, and then hung in cedar closets for 40 years. The woman behind the counter was in her 70s with a silver braid over one shoulder and reading glasses on a chain. "I need a gown," Lena said, "for tonight." The woman looked up, looked at her for a long moment, looked at her again, slower. "Honey," she said, "what color are your eyes exactly?" "Gray." The woman came out from behind the counter. "Follow me." 40 minutes later, Lena stood in front of a mirror in a back room that smelled like lavender and old paper, and she did not recognize herself. The dress was a deep midnight blue, almost black where the light didn't catch it, almost dark sapphire where it did. It had been made, the woman said, in 1987 for a senator's daughter who had worn it once and never again. The neckline was high in front, low and clean in back. The sleeves were long. It did not sparkle. It did not need to. "You have a mother's jewelry?" the woman asked. "My mother didn't have jewelry." "Grandmother?" Lena hesitated. "There's a pair of earrings. Small ones. Pearls." "Wear them." The woman's eyes were sharp behind the glasses. "Nothing else? No necklace? No bracelet? You understand?" "I understand." "And your hair?" The woman reached up, without asking, and pulled the elastic out of Lena's ponytail. Dark hair fell past her shoulders. Down, soft, like you didn't try. "I did try." "They don't need to know that." Lena met her own eyes in the mirror. It was not a stranger. That was the strange part. It was the opposite of a stranger. It was a woman she had not seen in the mirror in 4 years, a woman she had in fact deliberately stopped seeing, and the woman was looking back at her now with a small, tired, knowing expression, and that expression said, "There you are." "How much?" Lena said, her voice hoarse. The woman shook her head. "I've had that gown in my back room for 9 years, honey. I was waiting for someone it fit. I can't take it for—" "You can. You will. And when you come back," the woman's eyes glinted, "you'll tell me how it went." Lena, for the first time in what felt like a year, felt the corner of her own mouth move toward something that might have been a smile. "All right." At 6, she took a taxi home. At 7, she let Theo into her bedroom. He sat on the edge of her bed and did not say anything for a long time as he watched her at the small vanity, his older sister's face in the mirror becoming slowly, in small steps, a face he almost didn't know. A little eyeliner. Not much. A sweep of something on her cheekbones that brought her out of the shadow she had been living in, her mother's pearls, tiny, in her ears, her hair down, dark, clean, soft, falling where it wanted. When she stood up and turned around, Theo's mouth actually opened. "Lena, don't. You look like, don't say it, like Mom." She stopped. She had not been prepared for that. Their mother, who had been tired at the end, and thin, and frightened, and who had held Lena's hand the night before the morphine got too heavy, and had said, "You got small, baby. You got so small. Don't stay small." Her mother, who had worn a dress this color to their father's funeral 20 years ago, a dress she had bought in a little shop nobody remembered the name of. Lena closed her eyes. Theo. Yeah. If I don't come home by 3, you call Aunt Celia. You don't call the police. You call Celia, and you tell her the word Saltbridge. She'll know what to do, okay? There was a long silence. Saltbridge. His voice was very small. Say it back to me. Saltbridge. Good. Lena, what does It doesn't matter what it means, just the word. He nodded. She crossed the room. She bent and kissed the top of his head, the way she had done when he was 8 and she had still been someone else. I'll be home, she said. Promise me. I don't promise things I can't promise, Theo. You know that. Then just... His voice wobbled. Just come home. I'll try to. The taxi dropped her 2 blocks from the Corvelle at 10 minutes to 9. The rain had stopped. The air was cold and clean and carried the smell of the river. Her coat was a simple black wool. Her heels clicked, quiet and certain, on the wet sidewalk. She had not been this woman in 4 years. She was not sure in the taxi whether this woman was still in her at all. Whether she would find, when she reached the hotel, that there was only the waitress, frightened and small under this beautiful old dress. But as she walked past the street lamps, as the lights of the Corvelle rose in the distance, that white stone face, that red carpet under the awning, those men in long coats and women in furs stepping out of black cars, something shifted inside her, quietly, the way a key shifts in a lock you haven't opened in years. She stopped at the corner, under a streetlight. She took one breath in, she let it out, she lifted her chin. And when Lena Hart rounded the last corner and walked toward the doors of the Corvelle Hotel, past the doorman, past the valets, past the men in dark suits who watched the entrance with the dead-eyed patience of men paid to watch entrances, she did not walk like a waitress in a borrowed dress. She walked like a woman who had once, a long time ago, and in a country she did not name, walked out of a burning building with a 9-year-old girl on her hip and had not looked back. Upstairs on the 9th floor, the ballroom was filling. The champagne was cold. Roman Viscari was standing near a tall window, nursing a bourbon, glancing without interest at the door, expecting, somewhere between amusement and impatience, a shy waitress in cheap heels. He was not, he would realize in about 4 minutes, going to get one. Lena gave her coat to the attendant at the door. She gave her name, her real name, the one she had not said out loud in a professional setting in 4 years, to the man with the list. And then she stepped into the elevator, and the doors closed on her reflection, and the small mirror in the brass-trimmed car showed her, for just a moment, the woman she had been and the woman she still was, looking back at each other after a very long time apart. The elevator began to rise. The elevator climbed in silence, 1 floor at a time, the soft chime marking each passing number like a countdown Lena couldn't slow. She watched the brass needle sweep from 5 to 6 to 7, and she thought, absurdly, about the first time she had ever put on a formal dress. She had been 19, at an embassy reception in a city she would not name. She had worn something green and cheap and had spilled champagne on her own shoes inside the first hour. An older woman, a British attaché named Margaret, the kind of woman who wore diamonds to breakfast and did not suffer fools, had taken her aside in the powder room and said, without unkindness, "Stand up, darling. Whatever you have to do in this room tonight, you will do it better if your spine remembers it is made of bone and not of apology." Metal. Lena had never forgotten that sentence. She straightened her spine now, in the brass-trimmed elevator of the Corvelle Hotel, and she let the memory of Margaret's voice settle in her shoulders. The needle swept to 8. The chime sounded. To 9. The chime sounded again. The doors slid open. The sound hit her first. Not loud, exactly. Expensive sound was never loud. It was the warm, low roar of 200 wealthy voices layered over a string quartet that was playing something from Dvořák, and under all of it, the soft clink of crystal and the muted footsteps of waitstaff on deep carpet. A sound like money pretending to be culture. The second thing that hit her was the smell. Gardenias in tall arrangements on pedestals along the entry hall. A woman's perfume. Something French, something old, as she passed Lena without looking. The faint, cold mineral smell of the champagne being poured at a station to her left. The third thing was the light. The ballroom of the Corvel's ninth floor had 2 enormous chandeliers and 12 tall windows that looked out over the bay, and the lights of the bridge were strung like white pearls against the black water, and every single person in that room was lit from above like they had paid extra for it. Which, in a way, they had. Lena stepped forward and let the attendant take her small clutch bag to check. She did not take anything in return. She didn't need a claim ticket. She wasn't planning to forget. "Miss Hart." The voice came from her left. She turned, slowly, the way her mother had once taught her to turn when a stranger said her name. Neither quickly, as if surprised, nor slowly, as if afraid. Just the way you turn when someone has addressed you by a name you know is yours. The man was tall, 60-ish, with white hair combed back and a gold pin on his lapel. A maitre d' of some kind, or a man who performed the function. He had a tablet in his hand, but wasn't looking at it. He was looking at her with polite, unreadable attention. "Yes." "Mr. Vescari is by the north windows. Shall I show you?" "No, thank you." He paused. His eyes moved over her, once, professionally, the way such men's eyes always did, cataloging the dress, the lack of jewelry, the absence of a visible escort. Whatever conclusion he came to, he did not share it. He gave a small nod and stepped aside. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Hart." She walked past him into the room, and the room, by slow degrees, noticed her. It was not a dramatic thing. There was no sudden hush, no head snapping around. This was not that kind of crowd. The people in this ballroom had been taught from childhood not to stare, and had been taught from adulthood that the appearance of not staring was often more powerful than staring. But Lena had lived inside rooms like this before, and she knew the sound rooms made when attention shifted. The string quartet did not falter, but a conversation 6 feet to her right paused on the wrong word. A woman in a silver gown by the champagne station took a sip she hadn't planned to take. A man in a tuxedo by the bar turned to his companion and said something under his breath that made the companion glance toward the door. Lena did not look at any of them. She walked slowly toward the center of the room, and she let them look. She had forgotten, in 4 years, how this felt. It wasn't vanity. She had never been a vain woman, and after everything she had seen, she had less patience than ever for the small pleasures of being admired. It was something older than vanity. It was the clean, cold feeling of walking into a place on her own terms, owing nothing, carrying her own weight, answering to nobody. It was a feeling she had trained herself out of because it was dangerous to feel it in a black apron. And now, because a dangerous man had left a dangerous envelope on a private room table, she was feeling it again, and her whole body was remembering, second by second, that this was who she had been before she had chosen to be small. "Well," a voice said beside her, warm and amused, "aren't you a thing?" Lena turned her head. The woman had come up on her left as quietly as a cat. She was maybe 35, maybe a little older. Dark red hair cut severely to her jaw, a gown the color of dried blood, a single diamond on a chain at her throat that was both subtle and, Lena estimated, worth about the same as a small house. She held her champagne the way a surgeon holds a scalpel, precisely, and by habit, and without thinking about it. "I'm sorry," Lena said. "Have we met?" "Not yet." The woman's mouth was a narrow, clever curve. "Elena Varga, and you must be the waitress." She said the word waitress the way another woman might have said raccoon, with a light, amused disgust, with a little laugh underneath it, with the certainty of a woman who had already decided what you were worth and was now enjoying the formality of watching you confirm it. Lena let a small silence do the first work for her. Then she said pleasantly, "I'm Lena Hart." "Oh, I know." Elena's eyes moved over her. Dress, earrings, hair. No jewelry at the neck, no ring, no watch. "I was at dinner with Roman when he came back from Marin's on Thursday and told us he'd invited a girl off the floor. I thought he was joking, to be honest. Roman doesn't usually pull his entertainment out of the service station." "I'm not entertainment." "No?" "No." "Well," Elena smiled. "Then what are you, sweetheart?" Lena allowed herself, for the first time that night, to smile back. It was not the waitress's smile. It was a smile she had learned from a very different kind of woman, in a very different kind of room, a smile that did not reach the eyes because it was not meant to. "I'm a guest." Elena's own smile didn't flicker, but something behind it did. Something small and quick. The smallest recalibration. Lena recognized it because she had lived among women like this once, and she knew what it looked like when one of them realized the shape of the object in front of her was not the shape she had assumed. "A guest," Elena repeated lightly. "Of course. And tell me, Lena, was it? What does a guest like you do with her evenings when she's not bringing out the bread?" "Tonight," Lena said, "I was invited to a gala. And before tonight, I worked long shifts. And before the long shifts?" There was a half-beat of silence. Lena did not look away from her. "Before the long shifts," she said softly, "I did other work." "Oh." Elena tilted her head. Genuine, surgical curiosity now, the veneer of mockery thinning. "What kind of other work?" "The kind you don't ask about at parties." Elena looked at her. It was a look that lasted 2 seconds and contained 3 separate conclusions. Lena could watch each one arrive behind the woman's eyes. First, this is not a waitress. Second, Roman does not know this is not a waitress. Third, whatever this is, it is going to be a problem, and the question is whose problem. "Well," Elena said again, more quietly. She lifted her champagne. "Welcome to the gala, Miss Hart. I hope it's memorable for you." "Thank you. One small piece of advice since we've just met." Elena's eyes held hers over the rim of the glass. "Roman Vescari is not a man who likes surprises." "Noted. I mean it. He will smile at you all evening. He will put his hand on the small of your back when he introduces you to the governor's cousin. He will pour you a second glass of something very good. And then, when everyone has gone home, he will sit down in a quiet room somewhere, and he will think very carefully about what kind of woman walks into a room she wasn't born into, dressed like she was, and he will decide what to do about her." "And what do you think he'll decide, Ms. Varga?" A slow, unreadable smile. "I think," Elena said, "that you should enjoy your champagne." She touched the rim of her glass lightly to Lena's empty hand, as if toasting an invisible drink, and then she drifted away into the crowd, her red gown moving like a blade through wheat. Lena watched her go. Her heart, she noticed with clinical interest, was not racing. It was, if anything, slower than it had been 20 minutes ago on the street. She had forgotten that about herself, too. How her body quieted in rooms like this, how it pulled inward and steadied the way it used to steady before she had to do something difficult. Some people ran hot in danger. Lena, always, had run cold. She turned, at last, toward the north windows. He was watching her. Roman Vescari was standing exactly where Elena had implied he would be, alone, a low glass of something amber in his right hand, the city lights behind him through the tall window. He was not trying to pretend he had not been watching her. His eyes were fixed on her across the length of the room, quiet and intent and slightly narrowed, and as she began to walk toward him, one of the men in his inner circle, the scarred man from the private room, in a black tuxedo tonight, looking considerably less comfortable in it, leaned in and said something to him. Roman answered without moving his eyes off Lena. The scarred man glanced at her, did a quick double-take, and then looked back at Roman and very slightly shook his head. Then he stepped back. Lena crossed the ballroom at an unhurried pace. Heads turned as she passed, and turned back, and murmured. A tall young senator she half recognized from a newspaper lifted his chin in a small practiced acknowledgement and got nothing in return. A woman in yellow who did not like other women being beautiful at her parties did not lift her chin. She stopped 6 feet from Roman Vescari. "Mr. Vescari." "Miss Hart." His voice was low, the same smoke-roughened voice as the private room, but it was pitched differently tonight, careful, slightly off its axis. He was, she realized with something like satisfaction, trying to find his footing. "Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for coming." He was looking at her fully now. He was not looking at her dress. That was an interesting choice. He was looking at her face. "You're not what I expected." No, I didn't think so." He paused. "Most people, when I ask them a question, try to give me the answer they think I want. I've noticed. Most people don't say I've noticed to me in that voice. I've noticed that too." The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The same not a smile as the private room. But his eyes were different, and that was what Lena was watching. In the private room on Thursday, his eyes had been flat, amused, curious the way a cat is curious about a moth. Tonight, for the first time, there was the beginning of something else in them. Caution, respect, maybe, at a considerable distance, and the thing she had seen for half a second on Thursday, the thing she had almost missed. The look of a man who had noticed a piece of furniture that did not belong in the room and was beginning to understand that the piece of furniture was not, in fact, furniture. "Who are you, Miss Hart?" "A guest at your party." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'm giving you tonight." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she did not expect. He nodded, a small, grave nod, and lifted his glass a fraction of an inch in something that was not quite a toast. All right. Drink?" "Water, please, with lemon." "Not champagne?" "Not yet." Another small, almost smile. He lifted 2 fingers. A waiter appeared beside him, as if summoned out of the air. Roman murmured to him. The waiter vanished. The glass of water with lemon in a crystal tumbler arrived in under 20 seconds. Lena took it, and she took a sip, and she tasted nothing because her attention was elsewhere. Her attention was on the room. She had been counting, almost unconsciously, since she had stepped off the elevator. She had clocked the exits. 3, 2 visible, one behind the musicians that she would bet her mother's pearls led to a service corridor. She had clocked the security. 8 of Roman's, discreet, 3 of the hotel's, less discreet, and 2 men in bad suits by the east wall who did not belong to either group, and who were, her gut told her, watching from a distance for reasons of their own. She had clocked the faces. A city councilman, a real estate developer whose name had been in the papers 3 months ago for reasons he had paid a lot of money to make go away. A shipping magnate, 2 judges, a priest, which was a surprise, a thin, elderly man in the far corner, seated in a wing-back chair that had clearly been brought in just for him, surrounded by younger men whose body language said bodyguards and whose accents, when Lena had passed near them 2 minutes ago, had said not from here. She had not, until now, let her eyes rest on the old man in the chair. She let them rest now. He was very thin, very old, 75 maybe 80. A narrow face, high cheekbones, a white beard trimmed close, a black suit with a dark red tie. He was holding a glass of something clear and untouched. He was listening to a young man at his ear with half his attention, and with the other half he was scanning the room, the way old hunters do, without seeming to. And as Lena's gaze found him, his own gaze found hers. For a moment she could not breathe, not because she recognized him, because he recognized her. She saw it move across his face, a flicker of confusion. Then, slowly, a widening of the eyes, small and precise. Then, almost at once, the old hunter's discipline, a flattening of the features. But it was too late. She had seen it, and he knew she had seen it. His lips moved very slightly, a word, not aloud. She could not read the word, but the shape of it, she thought, might have been a name. The name he had mouthed was not Lena, and not Hart. Her hand around the crystal tumbler of water did not tremble. She had been trained, a long time ago, for her hand not to tremble, but something cold and bright and terrible moved up her arm from her fingertips to her shoulder. "Miss Hart." Roman's voice was close to her ear. She had missed him speaking the first time. "Yes." "You went somewhere." "I was admiring the view." "Of my guests?" "Of the city." He was watching her face. He had not missed any of it. He was not, she understood now with complete clarity, a stupid man. She had been allowing herself in a small corner of her mind to treat him as a man with power and limited imagination, a man who could be handled with composure and the right kind of silence. That was a mistake. He was watching her now with exactly the attention she would have paid to an opponent across a table in a very different kind of room. He had seen her see the old man. He had seen the old man see her. He had not yet connected those 2 observations to each other, but he was a quarter of the way there, and she had about a minute before he got the rest of the way. "Who is the gentleman in the chair?" she asked, as lightly as she could. "That," Roman said, "is Mr. André Solové, an old friend of the family. He's visiting from abroad." "From where?" He moves around. "Ah. You don't know him?" "I don't know anyone here tonight, Mr. Vescari." "No," Roman said softly. "You don't know anyone, but he knows you." "Does he?" You saw his face, Miss Hart. I saw an old man in a chair. You saw his face, Roman said again, and now his voice was lower still, and the casual courtesy had gone out of it, replaced by something harder. You saw him, and he saw you, and I watched you both see each other. I have been in rooms with Andre Solovey for 23 years, Miss Hart, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he just looked at you. So I'm going to ask you once, politely, because I invited you into this room, and you are my guest. And I do not embarrass my guests. Who are you? Across the ballroom, a new arrival had drawn a small flurry of attention, and the string quartet had rolled into something brighter, and a waiter was passing with a tray of tiny salmon toasts. And under all of it, Lena stood 2 feet from Roman Vescari and felt the tip of a knife touch her ribs through the silk. She had, she calculated, 2 choices. She could give him a name, not her real name, her other name, the name on the passport she had burned, the name Andre Solovey. If that was who he was, she did not yet know if that was who he was, the name Andre Solovey had mouthed to himself across the room. That name would mean something to Roman. That name had meant something to a lot of people once. It would answer his question. It would also, she understood instantly, change everything. A waitress he could flirt with and dismiss. A woman with that name in her history was something else. Something he would have to decide, tonight, what to do with. Or she could not give him a name. She could hold her ground with nothing in her hand but water and lemon and composure, and she could let the evening unfold, and she could trust that the old man in the corner would not do anything rash, and she could walk out of this ballroom at midnight and never come back. The second choice was the choice Lena Hart, the waitress, would make. Lena Hart, the waitress, had been very good at walking away from rooms. She lifted her glass, took another sip of water, set it down very gently on the small table beside Roman's elbow. And then she looked up at him, and she did not look away, and she said, Mr. Vescari, I came here tonight because you invited me, and because a man like you does not invite a woman like me and then forget he did. I understand that. I respect it. But I want to be clear about something, since we're being clear with each other. I am a guest at this party. I am not a resource. I am not a problem. I am not a pawn in whatever it is you're running tonight. If you want to know who I am, you can ask me, and you have. And the answer is Lena Hart. If you want to know what I have been, where I have been, who else I have been, that is a conversation that happens in a different room, at a different hour, and only if I decide to have it. You do not get that conversation tonight because you invited me to a party. You get it because you earn it. Are we understanding each other? She had not raised her voice. She had not needed to. Roman Vescari looked at her. He looked at her for what must have been 3 full seconds, the longest silence in Lena's life. His face did not move. The hand holding the bourbon did not move. Around them the quartet played, and a woman laughed too loudly, and somewhere a champagne cork popped, and none of it reached them in the small, still pocket of air that had formed between his face and hers. Then he said very quietly, Yes, Miss Hart, we're understanding each other. Good. I'd like to introduce you to a few people. All right. None of them are Andre Solovey. Noted. He and I will speak later. I'd imagine you will. One corner of his mouth moved, and this time, for the first time all evening, for the first time she suspected, in a very long time, it was in fact a small, reluctant, genuine smile. You're an interesting woman, Lena Hart. I've been told. He offered his arm. She did not take it. She walked beside him instead, half a step ahead, just enough that the room would not read her as his. He noticed. He did not correct her. They moved through the gala together, and he introduced her to a judge and to a developer and to a woman who ran the opera board, and each of them looked at her with the polite, slightly startled attention of people who had been told there would be a waitress in a cheap dress, and had instead been presented with something they could not quite place, and each of them smiled and said, A pleasure, Miss Hart. And each of them watched her walk away afterward a beat too long. Through all of it, Lena kept track of 2 things, the position of Andre Solovey in his corner chair, and the position of Elena Varga, who was drifting, slow and red and surgical, through the room on an orbit that was bringing her one conversation at a time back toward them. Roman was pulled away at 9:40 by a man with a phone and an expression. He murmured an apology, an actual apology, which was its own small earthquake, and told her he would be back in 5 minutes, and he went through a door near the north windows with the phone to his ear. Lena did not follow him with her eyes. She took a fresh glass of water from a passing tray. She turned casually to look out the window at the lights on the bay. "A glass of the Krug, please," a voice said behind her, addressed to the waiter, then lower to Lena. "He'll be gone 8 minutes, not 5. Something from the warehouse. Don't wait for him." Elena Varga had come up on her right this time. Lena did not turn her head. "Are you always this generous with information, Ms. Varga?" "Only with women I've decided to be afraid of." "Have you decided to be afraid of me?" "I'm still deciding." Lena took a slow sip. "You should know," Elena said softly, looking out at the bay beside her, "that Andrei Solovey is going to come over here in about 90 seconds. He is going to come over here because Roman is out of the room and because he does not want to have a conversation with you in front of Roman. He is going to come over here and he is going to say one sentence to you, and then he is going to go back to his chair, and then the entire rest of your evening, and frankly, the rest of mine, is going to depend on what that sentence was. So if there is any chance, Miss Hart, any chance at all, that you would like to tell me now who you are and what you are doing in my gala, I would take it very kindly." "But, Moshkasi." "Your gala?" Elena's jaw tightened very slightly. "Roman's gala. My evening." "I see. Well?" 90 seconds, Lena said. "That's not very long." "No, it isn't." "Then you should use the time to decide what you think you can buy with what you know, Ms. Varga, because I assure you, whatever I tell you tonight, I'm going to remember that I told you." Elena looked at her, finally, fully. Her face was completely still. There was no mockery on it anymore. There was no cleverness. There was only a woman who had walked into a party expecting to watch a rival be humiliated, and who was realizing, too late, that she might be in the presence of something she did not have a category for. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Miss Hart." A new voice, thin, accented, old. A voice that had the softness of age and the steel of a life spent surviving. Lena turned. Andrei Solovey had risen from his chair. He had crossed the room without her noticing. For a man of his age, he moved with startling quietness. He stopped 3 feet from her and inclined his head. A small, formal bow, the kind that meant something in certain countries and nothing in this one. And he looked at her with pale, wet, brilliantly alive eyes. "Forgive an old man for intruding. I saw you across the room, and I had to come and be certain my eyes were not lying to me." "Mr. Solovey, you know my name." "Mr. Vescari mentioned it." "Ah." His mouth made a small, rueful shape. "Of course, and what did he say?" "That you were an old friend of the family." "An old friend?" The word sat carefully on his tongue. "Yes, an old friend." He stepped very slightly closer. Elena Varga had gone so still beside Lena that she seemed to have stopped breathing. Several heads around them had turned, discreetly, the way heads turn in rooms like this one. "My dear," Andrei Solovey said very softly. His voice did not carry beyond the 3 of them. "The last time I saw you, you were carrying a child out of a building. I do not think you will remember me. I was on the other side of the airstrip that night, but I remember you. I have remembered you for a very long time, and I would like to know, when you have a moment, when this man whose party we are at is not listening, how you came to be a waitress in Ashford Bay." Lena did not move. Behind her, Elena Varga made a small, precise sound, a breath drawn in through the nose. "Mr. Solovey," Lena said, her voice level. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "No." He smiled, and the smile was so gentle and so sad and so unwavering that she felt a small, shameful sting behind her own eyes. "No, my dear, I do not. But I understand. I understand completely, and I will say nothing until you say it first. You have my word on that. I only wanted you to know, tonight, that in this room there is one person who knows, and that person is, if you will permit me the honor, your friend." He bowed again, small, formal. And then as quietly as he had crossed the room, he turned and went back toward his chair, and his bodyguards closed around him again, and by the time Roman Vescari came out of the far door with his phone lowered and a new, tighter line in his jaw, the moment had passed, and Andrei Solovey was seated in his wing-back chair once more with his untouched glass in his hand. Elena Varga did not move. Varga did not When she finally spoke, it was in a whisper that did not belong to the woman who had floated up to Lena with mockery 40 minutes ago. "Who are you?" Lena turned her head, looked at her for a long time. "Tell Roman," she said quietly, "that I went to the powder room. Tell him I'll be back in 10 minutes. Tell him whatever you like, Ms. Varga, but when he asks you about Mr. Solove, you tell him exactly one thing. You tell him that his old friend of the family called me my dear. You tell him that. And then you watch his face, and you tell me tomorrow what you saw." She set her glass down. She walked past Elena Varga without looking at her. She walked past the quartet, past the men by the east wall, past the priest, past the woman in yellow, who had not been able to lift her chin when she passed the first time and who, she noticed, could not lift her chin when she passed now either. The powder room off the 9th floor ballroom had a small, mirrored antechamber with a velvet bench. Lena closed the door behind her. She sat down on the bench, and for the first time since the elevator, she allowed herself one single, shuddering breath. Her hands were shaking. She looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. You were carrying a child out of a building. She had carried 7 children out of that building. She had carried them, 2 at a time, some of them limp, some of them crying, some of them asleep on something the doctors had given them so that they could be moved without sound. She had been 23 years old. The building had been on fire because someone had wanted it on fire. The child in her arms, as she had crossed the airstrip, the child Andrei Solove had apparently seen from the other side, had been a 9-year-old girl named Mira, who had weighed 44 pounds, who had had a cut on her cheek that had bled all down the front of Lena's shirt, who had whispered over and over, in a language Lena had only barely understood at the time, "Please, please, please, please." Mira had lived. Lena had not known, until tonight, sitting on a velvet bench in a powder room in Ashford Bay, how much of herself she had left on that airstrip. She closed her eyes. She breathed slowly, in through her nose, out through her mouth, the way she had taught herself to breathe in rooms much worse than this one. She gave herself 60 seconds, no more. Then she opened her eyes. She stood up. She checked her face in the mirror. Her eyeliner had not smudged. Her mother's pearls had not moved. Her hair was soft, falling, exactly as the old woman at the consignment shop had arranged it. The woman in the mirror was a woman she had not seen in 4 years, and the woman in the mirror was looking back at her the way she had looked back at her in the bedroom vanity earlier that evening, and the woman in the mirror said without speaking, "All right, now you finish what you came to do." Lena Hart straightened her shoulders. She opened the door of the powder room, and she walked back out into the gala, where Roman Vescari was already scanning the crowd for her, where Elena Varga was standing very still beside a pillar with her untouched champagne going warm in her hand, where Andrei Solove was sitting in his corner chair with his pale eyes half closed like an old lion who had finally, after a long day, been given something worth waking up for. The string quartet was still playing. The lights were still strung like pearls across the black water. The night was still young, and the waitress they had underestimated had not yet even begun. Roman was already moving toward her before her heels had crossed 10 feet of carpet. He did not look hurried. Men like Roman Vescari had learned, probably in childhood, not to look hurried in public. But the set of his shoulders had shifted, and his glass was no longer in his hand. He had set it down somewhere on his way across the room. And when he reached her, he did not bother with the small courtesies of a host. "Walk with me." "Where?" "The terrace. I need air. You need air. We're both going to take some." "Mr. Vescari, please." The word was quiet, and it surprised her, because it did not sound like a word that came easily to him. "Miss Hart, please." She looked at him for a heartbeat. Then she nodded, once, and let him guide her. Not by the elbow, not by the small of the back, nothing that would have read as possession to the watching room. He had learned from her earlier that she would not accept possession, but by a small half-turned motion of his body, the way a man gestures to a guest to precede him through a door. The terrace door was tucked at the far end of the north wall behind a screen of potted palms. One of his men, posted there, saw them coming and opened it for them without being asked, and closed it behind them without a sound, and then stayed inside. They stepped out onto a narrow stone balcony that ran along the face of the Corvel's 9th floor, and the night air hit Lena like a hand against her skin, cold, clean, smelling of the river and of somebody's cigarette somewhere below. The music and the voices dropped to a muffled hum behind the glass. Roman stopped at the stone balustrade. He set both hands on it. He looked out over the city, the long dark line of the bay, the bridge with its strung lights. Tell me about André Solove. I don't know him. You do. I don't. Miss Hart. He turned his head. He was not angry. That was the thing that made her pause. A man like Roman, in a situation like this, ought to have been angry, and he was not. He was tired, and he was curious, and he was paying attention, but mostly he was tired, the way a man gets tired when he realizes that the afternoon he had planned is not going to be the afternoon he gets. I don't know him, she said again, more gently. I have never met him. I did not know his name until you said it tonight. I did not know he was in this country or that he would be in this room. All of that is true. And yet he knows me. From where? She was silent. He waited. He did not push. Another small courtesy from a man whose whole life had been built on pushing. From a long time ago, she said at last. From a place I do not talk about. He saw me once, for perhaps 2 minutes, across a piece of ground. I did not see him. He remembered. That is all I can tell you tonight, Mr. Vescari. I'm sorry. I know it's not what you want. What I want, Roman said, is to understand what I've done. You haven't done anything. I invited a waitress to a gala because I was bored on a Thursday night. Yes. And the waitress turns out to be a woman André Solove knows. Yes. He laughed. It was a short, humorless laugh, a single bark into the cold air. Miss Hart, do you know who André Solove is? I'm getting the impression he's not a shipping merchant. No, Roman said. He is not a shipping merchant. He looked at her. In the light spilling out through the terrace door, she could see his face more clearly than she had in the ballroom. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint silver in his temples, the small scar on the bridge of his nose that she had not noticed before. Old, maybe childhood old. He did not look like a mafia boss out here. He looked like a man who had been standing up for too many hours and wanted to sit down. He is a man I have spent 23 years courting, he said, in a small, quiet way. He has resources I would like to have access to. He has connections I would like to have permission to use. For 23 years, Miss Hart, André Solove, has treated me with the exact measured politeness of a man who will never quite do business with me. I accepted that. I respected it. I built what I built without him, and I made sure he knew I had built it. And tonight, for the first time, I invited him into this city to show him what I had built, because I thought perhaps the time had finally come that he would look at me and say, "All right, Roman, I see what you have made of yourself." And instead he walked across my ballroom to speak to a woman he had never met before in my country, and he called her my dear, and he bowed to her, and he ignored me entirely. He didn't ignore you, Mr. Vescari. No? No. He made a choice about who in that room mattered more tonight. That's not the same as ignoring. Roman looked at her sideways. That is a distinction, he said slowly, that a woman in your position should probably not be drawing out loud. I'm aware. Then why are you drawing it? Because you asked me a real question, and I am tired of giving small answers. They stood there for a while in the cold air. A boat moved on the bay far below, a single slow red light. Somewhere above them, on a higher floor, someone had opened a window, and a fragment of music, different music, not the quartet, something old and sad from a radio, drifted down and was gone again. I want to ask you something, Roman said. All right, and I want you to answer me honestly, because tonight has been long enough already. All right. Who did you come here to be? She did not answer at once. It was not the question she had been expecting. She had been expecting "Who are you again?" for the 4th time since Thursday. She had prepared, on the walk from the powder room to the terrace door, 3 different versions of her non-answer for that question, each tuned to a slightly different mood. She had not prepared for "Who did you come here to be?" and she had not prepared for the quiet, almost humble way he had asked it. She turned her face toward the wind. She let it move her hair. I came here, she said, to be a woman I used to be, just for one night. Why? Because my brother told me I had gotten small. And had you? Yes. Why? Because the woman I used to be had cost me things I could not afford to keep paying for. What things? My mother. A long silence. My nights, my sleep, the sound of my own voice when I said things I did not want to say. What did you do, Miss Hart? She stopped. She turned the ring of her water glass in her mind, the one she had set down on the little table beside his elbow, and she watched, behind her eyes, the lemon circle slowly in the clear water. I was a person who stood between certain kinds of power and certain kinds of people. For a while, for a handful of years, I was not a soldier. I was not a spy. I was, she found the word, an escort, in the oldest sense of that word. I got people from one place to another. Sometimes the people were important. Sometimes they were only children. I did it because I was good at it. And then I did it because there was no one else to do it. And then I did it because I had started. And I did not know how to stop. And then I came home because my mother was dying and I stopped. You. And Andre Solove saw me, I think, on one of the worst nights, or one of the most vivid ones. It's the same thing sometimes. He did not say anything for a long time. You could have lied to me, he said at last. Out here, just now. Yes. Why didn't you? Because if I had, Mr. Viscari, we would have had this same conversation in 3 months, in a worse room, and I would have had to tell you the truth anyway, and by then I would not have the option of walking out of the room when I was finished. You think you have that option tonight? I know I do. Do you? Yes. He smiled finally. It was a very small smile, a tired one. You are an extraordinary woman, Lena Hart. I'm an ordinary woman, Mr. Viscari, who has been in some unordinary rooms. There is a difference. He huffed out a breath that might have been another laugh. They stood there for a moment. Behind the glass, the gala was still running. Someone laughed, loud enough that the sound came through even with the door closed. A waiter passed in front of the glass with an empty tray, and through the reflection, Lena saw Elena Varga on the other side of the ballroom, her red gown a-slash against a pillar, her eyes fixed on the terrace door. Mr. Viscari. Roman. Mr. Viscari, she said again, gently. There is a woman in that room watching us right now. She is watching us because she has decided that I am a threat to her, and she has decided that you, right now, are standing too close to a threat. In about 4 minutes, she is going to come out here and interrupt us. I would like to say something to you before she does. Say it. If you want to know what I used to be, you can ask me, and I will probably tell you. If you want me to be that woman again, for your purposes, even for one night, even for the best reason you can invent, the answer is no. It will always be no. I did not put her away for you to wake her up, Mr. Viscari. I put her away for me. I borrowed her back tonight, for one evening, because I needed her. That borrow ends when I walk out of this building. Are we understanding each other? He did not answer at once. Yes, he said finally. We are understanding each other, Miss Hart. Thank you. May I say something? Yes. I am not a good man. I had assumed. His mouth moved. Yes. I thought you had. Go on. I am not a good man, and I have built what I have built with the hands I was given, and some of those hands I have washed since, and some of them I have not. I have not, in a long time, stood across from a person who spoke to me the way you have spoken to me tonight. Most of the people in my life flatter me. The few who do not flatter me are paid not to flatter me and are, therefore, in a different way, also flattering me, including Ms. Varga, especially Ms. Varga. A pause. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that when I say I am grateful for tonight, I am not flattering you. I am telling you something true. I do not know yet what I am going to do with tonight. I do not know what Andre Solove is going to do with tonight. I do not know whether the men standing against the east wall of my ballroom, who I did not invite and who I noticed at 9:15, are going to remain a problem or become one. I know only that I am grateful for the conversation, for the honesty, for the fact that you did not try to make this evening easy for me. It wasn't in my power to make it easy for you, Mr. Viscari. No, he said softly. I don't think it was. Behind the glass, Elena Varga began to move. Roman saw her too. He sighed. He straightened up from the balustrade. He adjusted his cuffs, each of them, slowly, with the unconscious precision of a man who had spent a lifetime being looked at. "She's coming." "I know. Would you like to go back inside separately? I can leave first. Make it look like a business conversation." "No." "No?" "It was a business conversation, Mr. Vescari. We just did business. We go back in together. And if Miss Varga has a problem with that, Miss Varga can take it up with me." He looked at her for a long moment. "All right." He opened the door. The noise and the warmth of the gala poured out. Lena stepped through first, the way she had walked beside him all night, half a step ahead. He followed. Elena Varga had stopped 3 paces from the door. Her face was a mask. The mask was very good, but Lena had been studying it for an hour now, and she could see the seams. "Roman." Elena's smile was brilliant. "There you are. Mr. Castellan has been asking for you for the last 10 minutes. I told him you were in a meeting." "I was." "Of course." Her eyes moved to Lena. The smile stayed. "I hope Miss Hart is enjoying her evening." "Miss Hart is enjoying her evening very much, Miss Varga," Lena said pleasantly. "Thank you for asking." "Lovely. Is Mr. Solove still with us?" She had not meant to be cruel, but the question landed like a small, precise stone into a still pond, and she watched the ripples move in tiny, tight rings across Elena Varga's face. "Mr. Solove," Elena said, with a tiny tightening at the corner of her mouth, "is still in his chair." "Yes." "Good. I wouldn't want to miss him before the evening ends." "Were you planning to speak with him again?" "I was planning to say good night." "Of course." "Miss Varga." "Yes, Miss Hart." "The conversation I had with Mr. Vescari on the terrace was a private one. I trust it will stay that way." "Of course, Miss Hart." "Good." There was a pause the exact length of a knife. Then Elena turned to Roman, her smile still in place, her voice musical. "Mr. Castellan is at the bar. Shall I bring him over or shall we go to him?" "I'll go to him." "Wonderful." Roman looked at Lena. "Miss Hart, 5 minutes. Take your time." He moved off toward the bar, and 2 men peeled off the wall and moved with him, and the small procession of power went down the length of the room toward a short, heavy-set man in a tuxedo who had been waiting with visible impatience for exactly this moment. Elena Varga did not move. "Miss Hart." "Ms. Varga." "You came here to humiliate me." "No." "No? I came here because Roman Vescari invited me. You have been part of this evening, Miss Varga, not the subject of it. Please don't flatter yourself." The last sentence landed the way the last sentence was meant to land. Elena's eyes went very cold. "You have been in this world for exactly 100 minutes, she said softly. "I have been in it for 12 years. I have buried 2 husbands in this world, Miss Hart. One of them I actually liked. Do not mistake a single good evening for a permanent position. I have no interest in a permanent position, Ms. Varga. I don't want Roman's empire. I don't want his affections. I don't want a room in his house. I came tonight because he asked. I will go home tonight because my brother is waiting up for me. I will probably never see most of these people again." "We'll see." "Yes, we will." Elena Varga stood there for 1 more second. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away into the crowd, and the red of her gown moved between the black tuxedos like something hemorrhaging, and she did not look back. Lena breathed out very slowly. She turned her head toward the corner of the room. Andrei Solove was watching her. He had been watching her, she suspected, through the glass of the terrace door. He had the quiet, content expression of a very old man who had seen a thing he had been waiting a long time to see. When he caught her eye, he lifted his small glass of clear liquid a fraction of an inch, in a toast that no one else in the room would read as a toast, and he tilted his head toward the seat beside him. And the invitation could not have been plainer if he had sent it on cream paper with a black wax seal. Lena crossed the ballroom. She felt the room look at her. She did not look back at it. 2 women stepped, unconsciously, out of her way. A judge she had been introduced to earlier lifted his glass at her as she passed and got a small, polite nod in return. Andrei Solove's bodyguard stepped aside for her. She sat down in the second wingback chair. Someone had brought it over for her while she was on the terrace, she realized. The old man had prepared for her arrival as if he had known he was going to get one. And she folded her hands in her lap. Her mother's pearls caught the light, once, and then did not. For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. "It has been 17 years," Andre Solovey said at last. His voice was very soft. It did not carry past the two of them. "Yes, you were 23. I was. And the girl. Mira. Her name was Mira. She lived. She lived. Where is she now? In a country I will not name, at a university I will not name, studying something she is very good at. You hear from her. Once a year, on the anniversary, she sends a photograph. I do not answer. She does not expect me to." The old man nodded slowly. "That is a generosity, my dear." "It is a courtesy. There is a difference." "Yes." His mouth moved gently. "There is." A waiter drifted past. Andre Solovey did not stop him. Lena did not signal for anything. The light from the chandeliers fell on the old man's white beard and made it look for a moment almost luminous. "I will not," he said, "say your name. Not your old name, not in this room. You have my word on it for whatever my word is worth to you, which I understand is perhaps not very much." "It is worth what it is worth, Mr. Solovey. I take what it is. I will say, however, one thing. To you, quietly, because I believe you should hear it from someone who was there, and because I will probably not see you again, and I would not forgive myself if I did not say it. All right?" He turned his pale, wet eyes on her fully, and in that moment, Lena saw, as if through a crack, what Andre Solovey had been a long time ago, before he had become the careful, powerful old man in the wing-back chair. He had been something harder, something that had done things, something that had stood also between certain kinds of power and certain kinds of people, and had paid for it and had survived. "What you did on that airstrip," he said softly, "cost the people who wanted those children a very great deal more than the children. You will never know how much. There are men alive today because of what you did that did not happen. There are children, other children, not only Mira, who grew up because the calculation you forced certain people to make that night made them choose, for the first time, not to do a thing they had been going to do. I know this because I was one of the people who watched the calculation change. I was not an ally of yours. I was not quite an enemy. I was a man in a chair, at a table, in a room far from that airstrip, watching the price of a particular kind of cruelty be raised in a single night by the actions of a single woman. The woman was you. You never knew. You were never going to know. I have carried that knowing for 17 years, and I have wanted, very much, to one day meet the woman whose price it was. Lena did not move. She did not cry. She had not cried in 4 years. She did not start now, but she felt something very small and very bright move in the center of her chest, and she felt it settle somewhere under her ribs, and she knew, with the clarity that sometimes comes to a person in the middle of a room full of strangers, that she would carry the weight of what he had just said for the rest of her life. "Thank you, Mr. Solovey." "No, my dear." His eyes were kind. "Mom, thank you. May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you in Ashford Bay?" A small, slow smile. "I was invited to a gala by Roman Vescari, who has been writing me letters twice a year for 23 years. Polite letters, patient letters. And this year, finally, I thought, well, the man has been patient. I am old. I will go and see what he has built." "And what have you seen?" "I have seen a man who has built a great deal with his hands. Some of it I approve of. Some of it I do not. I had come, I think, prepared to tell him, tonight or tomorrow, that our interests would not align, that I would return to my country, and that he would continue to receive his polite letters and nothing more. And now," the old man looked at her, really looked at her. There was a long, considered silence. "Now," he said, "I am going to wait. I am going to wait, my dear, and I am going to watch what Roman Vescari does next. Because a man is not only what he has built, a man is also what he does when something new walks into the room he has built, and I am very interested now in what Roman Vescari does with you. I am not his to do anything with, Mr. Solovey." "I know, my dear. That is what makes it interesting." He lifted his glass again. This time he drank. A single small sip. Then he set the glass back down on the little table beside him, and he folded his hands in his lap, and he closed his eyes. And for a moment he looked like nothing so much as an old man taking a small nap in a chair at a loud party. Lena sat beside him in the second chair for another 2 minutes. She did not disturb him. She watched the room, and the room watched her. And across the ballroom she could see Roman Viscari standing beside Mr. Castellan at the bar. And she could see that Roman Viscari was not listening to Mr. Castellan. Roman Viscari was watching her, sitting beside André Solovey, with the exact, quiet, disbelieving face of a man whose whole long evening had just tilted on an axis he had not known the room possessed. At the east wall, the two men in bad suits had shifted. Their posture had changed. One of them had his hand very casually inside his jacket. The other was no longer pretending to look at his phone. Lena saw them. She did not let her eyes rest on them. She leaned very slightly toward the old man in the wing-back chair, and she said quietly, "Mr. Solovey, your men." He did not open his eyes. "I see them. They are not mine, you know that." "I know that." "Will your men handle it?" "My men will handle it, my dear. The moment either of the gentlemen in question moves more than 6 inches, you do not need to think about it." "I wasn't going to." "I know. I was offering it as a kindness." "Thank you." His mouth moved into the small private smile again. "You are very welcome." Across the room, at the bar, Mr. Castellan said something to Roman Viscari, and Roman Viscari finally turned his eyes away from Lena and back to Mr. Castellan, and he answered whatever had been asked, and Mr. Castellan laughed, a big, genuine laugh, and slapped Roman on the shoulder in the way very rich men think is friendly, and is, in fact, a kind of assertion of equality. Roman smiled the small, tight smile of a man who is tolerating it because the evening required him to tolerate it. Then he excused himself, carefully, and began to walk back across the room. He did not walk toward her. He walked toward the east wall. Lena watched him go. She watched the two men at the east wall see him coming and make the mistake of pretending they had not seen him coming. She watched Roman's own men, 2 of them, she counted, 3, begin to drift, casually, at angles, closing distance without appearing to close distance. She watched André Solovey's men, on the other side of the old man's chair, do the same thing in reverse, in a smaller circle, around the chair and around her. She did not move. She had sat through worse. Roman reached the 2 men at the east wall. He did not raise his voice. She could not hear him because the quartet had moved into something from Elgar, and because the crowd was full and warm. But she could see his face. His face was perfectly polite. His face was, in fact, the politest face she had seen on him all evening. Whatever he said took him less than 15 seconds to say. When he was done, the 2 men looked at each other, and then one of them nodded, and they both turned together, and walked without hurrying to the nearest exit, and Roman's men walked with them, not close enough to touch, close enough to matter, and the doors closed behind all of them, and the gala went on. André Solovey opened his eyes. "Well, my dear," he said softly, "he has at least learned over 23 years how to handle a small problem quietly." "Yes." "That is something." "Yes." "The large problems, of course, are another matter." "Yes." The old man smiled. He reached out his thin, blue-veined hand and he laid it very briefly on top of Lena's where it rested on the arm of the chair between them. "Go home tonight, my dear. Sleep. Eat something in the morning. Kiss your brother. Go to your work if you must. Let the room you have just walked into do its own thinking for a day or 2. You have done enough tonight. You have done more tonight, I think, than you realize." "Mr. Solovey." "Yes." "Will I see you again?" He was quiet for a moment. "Perhaps," he said at last. "Perhaps not. I am very old, my dear. I do not make promises about tomorrows. But if you do not see me again, if this is the only night we share, then I want you to remember only this. You walked into this room tonight as a waitress. You will walk out of it as something else. And whatever that something else is, it is not for Roman Viscari to decide. It is not for that woman in the red dress to decide. It is not even for me to decide. It is for you. Only for you. Do you understand me?" "I understand." "Good." He took his hand away. He closed his eyes again. And Lena Hart, a woman the whole room had been told was a waitress, who was sitting now in the seat of honor beside the most powerful man in the building, who had an hour and a half ago dismantled the woman who had expected to humiliate her with a single quiet sentence on a terrace, rose from the wingback chair, smoothed the midnight blue silk of her dress with one slow hand, and walked back out into the gala to finish her evening. The quartet was still playing. The lights were still strung across the black water of the bay. And somewhere behind her, a man named Roman Vescari was turning, finally, to watch her walk away, with the expression of a man who had, at last, understood the size of what had entered his house. She left the gala at 11:40. She had stayed another half hour after rising from the chair beside André Solové, and she had spent that half hour doing nothing of any consequence, sipping a single glass of champagne, finally from a tray, letting a woman from the opera board explain to her at unnecessary length the challenges of raising money for a production of Tosca, smiling politely at a judge's wife who had decided late in the evening that Lena must be the daughter of an old friend she could not quite place. None of it mattered. Lena had already done the work she had come there to do. The rest was choreography. She was letting the room see her as she was leaving in exactly the way the room had seen her as she was arriving. Unhurried, unimpressed, and not, under any circumstances, in a position to be followed out. Roman found her at the elevators. She had said her small goodnight to him 10 minutes earlier, near the bar, in front of Mr. Castellan and 2 members of the city council, because goodbyes in a room like that were public documents, and she wanted hers on the record. She had said, "Thank you for a lovely evening, Mr. Vescari." She had offered her hand. He had taken it, a brief, formal handshake, not a gentleman's kiss on the knuckles, which some of the men in the room had been half expecting, and he had said, "Thank you for coming, Miss Hart. Get home safely." And that had been the end of the public transaction between them. And then, at the elevators, alone, with one of his men at a courteous distance, he came around the corner while she was waiting for the car to arrive. "Lena, not Miss Hart, not out here." She turned. "Roman." He stopped a few feet away. He did not come closer. He seemed to understand without being told that coming closer would have been its own kind of answer. "I told them I was walking you to your car. I didn't bring a car. I know. I'm walking you to the one I'm lending you. I don't need... Lena, please." She looked at him for a moment. There was something in his face that was not the face she had been watching all night. It was not a host's face or a boss's face or the careful, tired face of the man on the terrace. It was something younger than that, something quieter. The face, she thought, that belonged to Roman Vescari at 45 when Roman Vescari did not know anyone was watching him. "All right," she said. The elevator came. They rode down together. Neither of them spoke. The brass needles swept the other way this time. 9, 8, 7. And Lena watched it without watching it, the way she had watched it on the way up, and she let herself feel, for the first time since the private room at Marin's 3 days ago, very tired. At the lobby, the doormen did not look at them. A black sedan was already at the curb, engine running, a man in a plain dark suit at the wheel, who did not turn his head when they stepped out into the cold. Roman opened the back door himself. "Mikhail will drive you home. He works for me, but tonight he does not. Tonight he drives you. He watches you walk into your building, he waits until a light comes on your floor, and then he drives away. He will not follow up. He will not report to me. You will not see him again unless you ask for him. Do you understand me?" "I understand. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what you have tonight from me is exactly what you asked for on the terrace. Nothing more, nothing less. All right. There is one other thing." "Yes." "Ms. Varga." "Yes. I'm going to speak with her tonight, after you leave. She is not going to be a problem for you. I want to be clear with you about that also because you may be thinking about it on the drive home, and I would prefer you not to spend the drive thinking about it. She is not going to be a problem for you." "Roman." "Yes." "She is going to be a problem for you." He looked at her. "I know," he said softly. "I know she is. That is not my business." "It is not. I am telling you anyway." A beat. "Thank you," Lena said, and meant it. "For the ride, for the evening, for the way you handled the men at the East Wall." "You saw that." "Of course I saw that." "Of course you did." He stepped aside. She got into the back of the sedan. He closed the door after her, carefully, the way a man closes a door he is trying very hard not to slam. Through the tinted window, she saw him standing on the sidewalk, his hands in the pockets of his overcoat, watching the car pull away. He did not wave. He did not move. He simply watched. She did not turn her head, but she watched him in the side mirror until he was a small dark figure in front of the white stone of the Corvelle, and then he was nothing at all, and the car turned a corner, and the hotel was gone. Mikhail drove her home in silence. He was, as promised, professionally unremarkable. He did not ask if she wanted the heat turned up. He did not ask about her evening. He took the turn smoothly, he came to gentle stops, and at 12:07 in the morning, he pulled up in front of the narrow brick building on Harrow Street where Lena Hart lived with her 17-year-old brother and did not unlock the door for her until she had her hand on the handle. "Good night, Miss Hart." "Good night, Mikhail. Thank you." "You're welcome." She got out. She walked up the 3 stone steps. She let herself into the building. She climbed the stairs slowly, because her feet hurt, because her back hurt, because she was wearing a dress that had been made for a senator's daughter in 1987, and the senator's daughter had evidently not expected to walk in it as far as Lena had walked in it tonight. She reached the 3rd floor. She unlocked the apartment door. Theo was on the couch. He had not moved, she suspected, since she had left. He was wearing the same hoodie. There was a blanket around his shoulders, and his phone was face down on the coffee table, and he was awake. He turned his head when she came in, and he looked at her in the doorway. In the midnight blue dress, with her mother's pearls in her ears, with her hair down and soft, and his whole face did something complicated. "Hey," he said, very quietly. "You're home." "I'm home." "Saltbridge?" "Not needed." He breathed out. Not a dramatic breath, a small one. A boy letting out a breath he had been holding in small pieces for 4 hours. Lena closed the door. She locked it. She slid the chain. She walked over to the couch and sat down on the arm of it, carefully, in her dress. "Can you make me a grilled cheese?" she said. "At midnight?" "At midnight." "You're wearing a $5,000 dress." "It's a $90 dress, thank you very much." "You're wearing a $90 dress that looks like a $5,000 dress. So, make it on a paper plate." He got up. He went into the kitchen. She heard the pan come out, the butter hit the skillet, the bread being pulled from its bag. She heard him humming, very faintly, something she didn't recognize. She realized, the sound of her brother being 17 and alive and hers, and the sound pressed against her chest in a way she had not expected, and she had to look down at her hands for a moment and let her jaw unclench. She slept for 4 hours that night and slept badly, and was up at 6. She went to work on Monday. She did not know, at first, whether that was the right choice. She had wondered, lying in bed at 4 in the morning with her eyes open on the ceiling, whether she should call Marin's and quit, whether she should pack a bag for her and Theo and go to her aunt's in the next state over for a week, whether she should, with the money she had been saving for 3 years, quietly put the apartment on a sublet and disappear. But by 6 she had decided, and by 7 she was on the bus, and by 11 she was at Marin's in her black shirt and her tight ponytail, folding napkins at the service station, and listening to the line cooks argue about whose turn it was to break down the walk-in. Her hands knew how to fold a napkin. That was somehow a comfort. Sasha appeared beside her around noon, quiet, pretending to reach for a clean salt cellar. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "Are you really?" "I'm really fine, Sasha." "Danny said you went to that gala." "Danny should mind her business." "Danny cannot mind her business. It's her defining trait." "Yes." Sasha paused. "Lena." "Yes." "Was it?" "It was an evening." "That's not an answer." "I know." Sasha looked at her sideways for a long moment. Then she shrugged, very slightly, as if she had decided to respect the non-answer, and she took her clean salt cellar and went back out onto the floor. Mr. Calder did not mention the gala. He did not, in fact, look at Lena for most of the day, which was unusual. Mr. Calder made a point of looking at his staff. When he finally did catch her eye, late in the afternoon, during the lull between lunch and the dinner rush, he crooked a finger at her and brought her back into his small office behind the service bar. "Lena." "Yes, Mr. Calder." "Mr. Vescari called this morning." She had been expecting it. She had been expecting it since she had walked out of the Corvelle. She kept her face still. "All right?" "He wanted me to know," Mr. Calder said carefully, "that if you ever wish to leave us, He will be happy to write you a reference. A reference. His exact phrase. And that if you wish to stay, I am to continue treating you as a member of my staff the same as anyone else. Not better, not worse. The same. His phrase again. He was very specific. Lena was quiet. He also said, Mr. Calder continued, more slowly, that he trusts I will understand this is not a matter of special treatment, that it is a matter of him noticing, for the first time in his life, how easy it is for a man in his position to make a woman's workplace difficult for her simply by having had dinner in it, and that he would prefer not to be that man. If I understood. Did you understand, Mr. Calder? I understood perfectly, Lena. He looked at her for a moment. He was, she noticed, looking at her in a way he had never looked at her before. Not with suspicion, not with reassessment, with a small, tired kind of respect, the kind that managers only ever showed each other and not the staff. I don't know what happened Saturday night, he said. I am not asking. I want you to know I am not asking. I am telling you that the schedule I posted last week stands. The private rooms stay with Marcus when he comes back. You are on the floor. If anything happens in this restaurant that makes you uncomfortable, you come to me, directly. Not to Sasha. Not to the line. To me. Thank you, Mr. Calder. Go take table 11's dessert out. They've been waiting. Yes, Mr. Calder. She went. She took the dessert out. She folded more napkins. She worked the rest of her shift. She went home. She made Theo spaghetti. She slept a little better this time, for 6 hours. And that was Monday. Tuesday was the first day she heard the whisper. It came to her secondhand through Sasha in the alley at the back of Marin's around 4 in the afternoon, with a cigarette cupped in Sasha's hand, even though Sasha had officially quit smoking 3 times this year. Danny heard from her cousin's boyfriend, Sasha said, without preamble. Her cousin's boyfriend works security at the Corvel. He says Elena Varga is furious. He says there was a thing on Saturday night after you left. A thing in one of the small rooms off the ballroom. He says she left in her own car, alone, at 2 in the morning, with her makeup smeared. He says she was crying. Lena did not respond. Lena, I heard you, Sasha. He says she's been in meetings all day yesterday with people from the family. Whose family? The Viscaris and some other people. He said names. I didn't recognize them. He said Roman was in them too. He said Roman looked... Sasha hesitated. He said Roman looked tired. Lena. What? What did you do? I had a conversation, Lena said. She was staring at the brick wall across the alley. That is all I did. A conversation with who? With a man in a wing-backed chair. Sasha looked at her. That isn't an answer. I know. By Wednesday, the whispers had doubled. She heard the next one at the bus stop from an older woman in a church hat who did not know her name but knew her face. You work at that place on Harrow Street, don't you, dear? My daughter took me there for my birthday. And who told her, without knowing whom she was telling, that her son-in-law, who worked in some kind of distribution over in the warehouse district, had come home on Monday night very upset because something had shifted in the arrangements he had been running for Mr. Viscari, and nobody had told him what the shift was about. He said it's like something happened at a party Saturday, and nobody will tell him what it was, but his cousin has been out of work for 2 days, and his wife's brother has been pulled off a crew, and everybody is looking over their shoulder. And the thing is, dear, nobody at the top is saying a word. They're just moving people around. Quietly. Like somebody at the very top is thinking, and none of the ones below him knows what he's thinking. The bus came. Lena got on. She did not turn around. She did not hear from Roman for 5 days. She did not hear from Andre Solove. She had not expected to. She did not hear from Elena Varga, which surprised her. She had been preparing very slightly for some kind of retaliation from that direction. Not violence. She did not think Elena Varga was a violent woman in any way that used her own hands, but something cleaner and colder. The kind of retaliation that gets you fired from your job or evicted from your apartment in a week that looks, to the untrained eye, like coincidence. Nothing came. She kept waiting for it. Nothing. On the 6th day, a Friday, Theo came home from school with a boy named Marcus he had known since 8th grade, and the two of them shut themselves in Theo's room and played a video game for 2 hours. And Lena made them too much pasta for dinner, and Marcus stayed, and at one point Marcus said, "Your sister is pretty." Not to her, but to Theo. Too loud for the apartment. And Theo said, "I heard that man, Jesus." And Lena laughed out loud for what felt like the first time in a month. On the seventh day, Saturday, again, exactly a week, the envelope arrived. It was on the kitchen table when she came home from the morning shift. Theo was on the couch with a textbook he was not reading. Who brought it? A guy. What kind of guy? A guy in a suit. He didn't come in. He knocked. He asked for you. I said you weren't here. He gave me that and said, "Please put it somewhere your sister will see it," and left. What did he look like? Normal? Late 20s, haircut? He said please, like actually please, not the fake kind. Lena picked up the envelope. It was smaller than the last one. Plain cream. No seal. No name on the outside. She slid it open with a butter knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No letterhead. No address. Handwritten in a slanted, careful, slightly old-fashioned hand. "Miss Hart, I would like to ask you a favor. I would like you to meet me at a time and place of your choosing in a public setting, not at my home or my office, to discuss a question that has been occupying my attention for some days. The question is not about you. The question is about me. If you have no interest in discussing it, burn this note and forget it. I will not ask twice. You have my word on that. If you do have interest, any interest at all, even only curiosity, please write back a single word. When? Pass it to the man who will come by your apartment tomorrow morning at 10. With my thanks for the evening of the 14th, which has cost me more sleep than any evening in several years." Lena read it twice. Then she read it a third time. Lena. Theo had come up behind her. He was too tall now to read comfortably over her shoulder, but he was trying anyway. "Is that him?" "Yes. What does he want?" "He says he wants to ask me a question about himself." "That's weirdly vague." "Yes." "Are you going to meet him?" She did not answer. She folded the paper. She put it back in the envelope. She stood at the kitchen counter for a long moment, looking at the wall, and then she looked at Theo, and she said quietly, "Do you remember what I said a week ago? About getting small?" "Yeah." "I'm not going to get small again." "Okay, but I'm also not going to get big for the wrong reasons. You understand the difference?" "I think. A man like Roman Vescari will pull a woman into his life if she lets him. He does not have to be cruel about it. He can be polite about it. He can write handsome notes and send men in suits who say please. He can do all of that, and at the end of it, the woman will still have been pulled into his life. And once she is in his life, she will not get out of his life the same woman she was when she walked in." "Okay, so I'm going to meet him. Once. Somewhere public, in the daytime, for 1 cup of coffee. And I am going to hear his question. And if the question is what I think it is, I am going to give him an answer that is mine, not his. And then I am going to come home, and I am going to not see him again for a long time, and possibly ever. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Good." On Sunday morning at 10, a different man in a suit knocked on the apartment door. Lena opened it herself. He was, as Theo had said of his predecessor, normal-looking. Late 30s, maybe? Clean-shaven. A face that would not be remembered. "Miss Hart?" "Yes." "Sir is waiting for a word." She handed him a folded piece of paper. On it she had written in her own steady hand, "Wednesday, 3 p.m. Garrow Park, the bench by the duck pond. Alone." He took it without looking at it. He inclined his head, the way the maitre d' at the gala had inclined his head. He turned and walked back down the stairs. She did not watch him go out of the building. Wednesday came. The afternoon was cold and bright. The trees around the duck pond at Garrow Park were still mostly bare, and the ducks were fewer than they had been in the summer, and a small child in a red coat was being walked around the perimeter of the pond by an older man, a grandfather, probably, who was holding her hand and pointing at the water and saying something she was laughing at. An older woman sat on another bench, alone, reading. 2 teenage boys cut across the far side of the path, loud, shoving each other. Lena arrived at 2:50. She sat on the bench. She had not dressed up. A plain black coat, jeans, boots, her hair tied back but not as tightly as for work. No pearls, no dress, no armor. She did not need armor for this. If anything, armor would have been wrong for it. At 3 on the minute, Roman Vescari came up the path. He was alone. He was, for the first time since she had known him, alone. No men in coats at a polite distance, no car idling at the edge of the park. He was wearing a dark wool coat and a gray scarf. No hat. His hair caught the wind. He looked, in the afternoon light, like any man in his middle 40s coming to meet a friend in a park on a cold Wednesday. He stopped in front of the bench. He did not sit. "May I?" "Please." He sat down. Not too close. There was a foot of bench between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A duck on the pond did something indignant. The child in the red coat laughed again. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You asked." "I did." Another pause. "I have been trying," Roman said, "for a week to write you a sentence. I have written it perhaps 100 times. I have thrown each version in the fire. I am going to try to say it now, out loud, in a park, in front of ducks, because I think that is the only place in which I will actually say it." "All right." He was quiet for a long moment. He watched the water. "When I invited you to the gala," he said, "I invited you because I was bored. I was bored on a Thursday night in a private room at a restaurant I had been to 100 times before, and I looked up and there was a girl at the table pouring wine, and the girl did not look like a girl. I did not know what she looked like. She looked like she did not belong in the room she was in. That was all I thought at the time. I thought, let us see what happens if we put this person in a different room. It was the kind of thought a man like me has many times in his life, Miss Hart. Most of the time it is a cruel thought. I was not aware at the time that it was a cruel thought. I am aware of it now." Us. "All right." What I was expecting on Saturday night was a young woman in a borrowed dress who would be grateful to have been invited, who would be overwhelmed by the room, who would have a memorable evening, who would go home and tell her girlfriends about it, and who would, at some point in the evening, give me a small quantity of attention that would flatter me. I do not need to tell you that none of those things occurred. No, and I have been sitting, for a week, with the understanding that I, who have been, since I was 19 years old, a man who has not felt small in a room, spent Saturday evening in a room I had paid for, standing beside a woman who made me feel small. Not in a humiliating way, Miss Hart. That is the thing I keep coming back to. You did not humiliate me. You were, in fact, extraordinarily kind to me. On the terrace, in what you told me about yourself, in what you refused to tell me, in the way you did not use what André Solovey said to you against me, though we both know you could have. You were kind to me, and kind is not a word I have had much experience with, from the inside. He took a breath. Miss Hart. Yes. I have built what I have built because I grew up in a place where no one was kind. I have built it because I decided, at 15, that I would never again be a person to whom unkindness could happen without consequence. I have built it very well. I have built it by making other people afraid of me. I have built it by making other people need me. I have built it by inviting men who did not fear me or need me to dinners and private rooms, and I have, over years, made those men into men who feared me or needed me. It has worked. It has made me rich. It has made my family safe. It has made certain parts of the city, parts I will not describe to you in a park, function more or less the way I want them to function. Yes. And on Saturday night, a waitress walked into my ballroom in a dress she bought herself, and an old man I have been trying to do business with for 23 years crossed the room to tell her that he had been waiting 17 years to meet her, and I understood, standing at my own bar, next to a man whose name you would recognize from the newspapers, that I had built a room, Miss Hart, in which I was not, and have never been, the largest person. He stopped. He was staring at the water. I am 46 years old, he said. I had not known that about my own life until Saturday. The child in the red coat had gone. The grandfather had gone. The woman on the bench with the book had gone. The park was emptier and colder. Lena looked at him. What is the question, Roman? He turned his head. The question, he said slowly, is what a man does when he is 46 years old, and he has built what he has built, and he understands for the first time that there are sizes of person that he has not been, and that he has perhaps missed his chance to be. You think you've missed your chance. I think it is very late. It is late. Yes. It is not too late. He looked at her. You don't know me, Miss Hart. No. but I know rooms. I have stood in many more of them than you have stood in, Roman, and I will tell you one thing I have learned about rooms. The people who change in them are the people who decide to change in them. It does not matter how old they are. It does not matter what they have built. It does not matter who they have become. The only thing that matters is whether, on a particular morning, in a particular room, they say out loud, even if it is to no one, the sentence, "I do not want to be this anymore." If they say that sentence and if they mean it, they can change. It will cost them. They will lose people. They will lose things they have built. They will lose pieces of themselves they had thought were them. But they can change. I have seen it. I have seen it in men much worse than you. Have you? Yes. Did they live? Some of them. He was quiet for a long time. I do not think, he said, that I am asking you to tell me how to change, Miss Hart. I think that would be unfair to you. Yes, I think I am asking you. He stopped. He started again. I think I am asking you whether it would be possible, in the life you are willing to live, to allow a man like me to occasionally come and sit on a bench with you, in a park, in the afternoon, and tell you what he has been trying to do with himself that week. Not as, he searched for the word, not as a project of yours, not as a burden, not as a man trying to earn the right to anything from you, just as someone sitting on a bench who is trying and who has no one else he can say the sentence to. The silence that followed was long. Lena looked at the water. Roman. Yes, if I say yes to this, only to this, nothing else, I am saying yes to one bench, in one park, at a time I choose, when I choose, and not more than once a month. You do not come to my home. You do not come to my work. You do not send men to my home or to my work. You do not send notes unless I ask for one. Elena Varga does not know about the bench. Andrei Solovey does not know about the bench. Your men do not know about the bench. If the bench ever becomes something else, if it becomes a leash or a habit or a piece of leverage or anything that I did not agree to, it ends and we do not meet again. Yes. And Roman. Yes. I am not here to save you. I know. I am not your redemption. I am not your mirror. I am not your better angel. I am a woman who had a very particular evening once, in a dress she bought for $90, and who is going to go home tonight and fold napkins at a restaurant tomorrow, and who is not going to become a character in your story. I understand. Do you? Yes, I understand. She looked at him. He was looking straight ahead. His hands were folded in his lap. He looked tired, and he looked, she would have said if she had been forced, a little bit relieved. All right, she said. Then yes. One bench, once a month. You can choose the first one. After that, I choose them. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Roman. You don't know what I'm going to say on the next bench. The smallest smile, the same smile from the terrace, moved at the corner of his mouth. No, he said. I suppose I don't. He stood up. He did not offer his hand. He understood now not to offer his hand. Miss Hart. Mr. Viscari. Go home and kiss your brother. I will. He walked away down the path. He did not look back. The wind took his coat a little and the gray scarf, and then he turned at the bend and he was gone. And Lena Hart was left sitting on a bench by a duck pond in a park in the middle of the afternoon, alone, in a city she had chosen to come home to, and in a life she was, at last, beginning to take back in her own two hands. The first bench after that one was in a different park, on the other side of the city, and it was 4 weeks later, almost to the day. Lena chose it herself. That had been part of the agreement, and she had meant it, and she was not going to let the first test of the agreement be a test that she lost. She picked a small park near the river that almost no one in Roman Viscari's circle would have reason to visit, a place where she sometimes took Theo on summer Sundays when he was in one of his moods. And she told Roman the bench and the time and the day. In a single sentence passed through the same quiet man in the suit who had brought the note, and Roman sent back through the same channel a single word, yes. He came alone again. He sat at the far end of the bench again. It was a colder afternoon than the first one, and his breath made small clouds in the air when he spoke. He told her that second time what had happened to Elena Varga. Not in detail. He was as careful about detail. But he told her that Elena was no longer in his inner circle, that she had chosen, after what he called a very long evening, to leave his organization and return to her own city of origin, where she had family interests of her own to manage. That this had been her choice, not his, though he admitted, and she noticed he used the word admitted, which was not a word he would have used a month ago, that he had made the alternative unattractive enough that the choice had been, in effect, made for her. "Is she safe?" Lena said. "She is safe." "Are you sure?" "Miss Hart." He looked at her sideways. "I am sure because I made sure. I do not kill women over hurt pride. That is not a virtue. That is only a line I drew about myself, a long time ago, for reasons that had nothing to do with virtue. But the line exists, and she is alive, and she will stay alive, and I give you my word on it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked me on the first bench not to make her a problem for me, and you were right, and I am telling you so that you know I heard you, and so that you understand I am going to keep hearing you on every bench we sit on for as long as you are willing to sit." "All right. And Miss Hart?" "Yes. I am not telling you this to be thanked." "I know." "Good." He told her on the third bench about a warehouse he had closed. On the fifth bench, about a man he had let leave, a man he would have, 2 years ago, made an example of. On the seventh, about a conversation he had had with his younger brother, who ran a part of the business that Roman had, for 15 years, pretended he did not need to think about, and who had, after that conversation, stopped speaking to him. On the ninth bench, which was in early summer, and under a tree whose leaves were finally all the way out, he told her about a phone call he had had with André Solovey. He said, Roman told her slowly, that he had watched what I was doing. Yes. He said he had watched it with interest. He said that in his long life he had seen many men try to turn the shape of what they had built, and he had seen very few of them succeed, and he had seen none of them succeed quickly. He said that a man like me, trying to do a thing like this, at an age like mine, would suffer. He said I would lose people. He said some of the people I lost I would love. He said I would not always know, until after I had lost them, how much I had loved them. Yes. And then he said, Roman stopped. He looked at the tree for a moment, at the leaves moving against the sky. He said that he had decided, for the first time in 23 years, to do a small piece of business with me. Not a large one. Not one that made him my partner, only a small one. He said he did this not because he had decided I was trustworthy, because he had not yet decided that, and he was old, and he would most likely die before he decided it. He said he did it because he had watched me for 6 months, and had seen that I was trying, and that he believed a man who was trying should not have to try alone. That sounds like him? Yes. I thought so too. Roman paused. Miss Hart. Yes. He asked me to tell you he was well. Thank you. He asked me to tell you that he still does not promise tomorrows, but that he has decided to stop promising to not have them. She smiled in spite of herself at the small, dry construction of the sentence. She could hear the old man's voice in it. She was glad. On the 10th bench, Theo came with her. That had been his idea, and she had argued with him about it, and he had, as usual when he was right, simply waited her out. He was 18 by then. The birthday had come and gone in April, and he had made her promise not to make a fuss, and she had promised and had then made a fuss anyway, and he had been asking, in quiet, careful ways, for months to meet the man his sister occasionally went to parks with. You don't need to. I do need to, Lena. Why? Because he's been in your life for almost a year, and you still treat him like a thing that might explode. I want to see if he might explode. I can't see it from here. He's not going to explode. Then it won't be a problem that I meet him. She lost that argument the way she had been losing a lot of arguments to Theo lately, which was slowly and while telling herself she had not lost it. She wrote to Roman. Roman wrote back a single word, honored. They met, the three of them, in the small park near the river. Roman did not offer Theo his hand first, which was the correct choice. He waited for Theo to offer his, which Theo did, warily, and then Roman took it, and they shook once, and Roman sat down on the far end of the bench, and Theo sat in the middle, and Lena sat at the other end, and for a little while none of them said anything. So, Theo said finally. So, Roman said, I'm going to college in the fall. I've been told. She told you. She mentioned it, yes. Cool. Theo nodded slowly. I'm going to study international law. Roman looked at him. Lena looked at Roman looking at Theo. That, Roman said after a measured beat, is a serious field. Yeah. It is also a field in which a person can do a great deal of good. That's the plan. And a person can do a great deal of damage. I know. Do you? I do know, yes. Theo was not quite looking at Roman, but not quite looking away either. He had Lena noticed, set his shoulders the way she had 100 times in rooms she didn't talk about. He had never been taught to do that. He had only watched her do it. My sister used to do something in that world. Not the law part, the other part. She doesn't talk about it. I know some of it, enough of it. I know what she did. I know what it cost her. And I'm going to do the law part because somebody should. And because the people who do the part she did need somebody on the law side to actually know what they're doing. So, yeah, that's the plan. Roman was quiet for a long moment. Then he said very simply, Good. Thanks. Mr. Hart. Theo. Theo. May I say something to you with your sister present that I would say differently if she were not? Sure. Your sister is one of two people in my life whose opinion I value. The other is a man who is very old and will most likely not outlive this autumn. When he is gone, your sister will be the only one. I want you to know this because you should know the weight of the seat she occupies in my life, and because you should know that I know the weight of it, and because I want you to understand that I would not, under any circumstance, do anything that would harm her or you or anything that belongs to her. Not as a promise, not as a performance, as a fact. Are we clear? Theo looked at him. We're clear. Good. I still don't like you. I would be concerned if you did. Theo cracked, finally, the tiniest reluctant smile. Roman did not smile back, but he did nod, once, in a way that somehow closed the conversation better than a smile would have. Lena sat at her end of the bench and watched her little brother and the most feared man in Ashford Bay settle into a careful, suspicious, honest silence, and she thought, not for the first time that year, that there were kinds of healing that did not look like healing, that looked from the outside like ordinary afternoons, like a bench, like three people breathing in the same air. The summer passed. Theo left for college at the end of August. Lena drove him there herself, in a rented car she had paid for with her own savings, and she helped him carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs into a dorm room that smelled like industrial cleaner and pine boards. And she met his roommate, a cheerful boy from a small town in the South, whose mother had sent him with 6 jars of her own preserves, and she sat on the narrow college bed and watched her brother put his things away and did not cry, because she had told herself very sternly in the car that morning that she was not going to cry, and when it came time to leave, she hugged him for what was probably too long in the middle of his dorm hallway, and he hugged her back and he said into her shoulder, Hey, you did good, Lena. You did really good. Yeah, she said into his hair. So did you. On the drive home, she cried for the first time in 4 years and 48 days. Not the whole drive, just for one long stretch between 2 rest stops in the middle of nowhere, with no one in the car and no one on the road. And when she was done, she pulled into the next gas station and bought herself a terrible cup of coffee and drank it in the parking lot and watched the sun go down. That autumn, she quit Marin's. Mr. Calder had been expecting it for months, she suspected. He took the news with the small, professional nod of a man who had run restaurants for 30 years and had learned not to ask. He shook her hand. He told her she would be missed. He told her, in an unexpectedly gentle voice, that if she ever needed a reference, a real one, from him, not from anyone else, she should call him, and she said she would, and she meant it. She went to work at a small foundation. It was, by everyone's standards, a modest job. Associate director, a title that meant she did a little bit of everything because there was no one else to do it. The foundation was called the Bridgewell Initiative, and it had been started 3 years earlier with a seed grant from a donor whose name did not appear on any of its paperwork. Its stated mission was the safe relocation of families from conflict regions who had, for whatever reason, fallen through the cracks of the larger organizations. In practice, its actual mission, the one that was not on the website, was slightly broader and considerably more difficult, and Lena had been recruited to it, At the end of a very specific conversation on a very specific bench in early September by a woman named Iona, who had once, 17 years ago, been the other person on the other side of an airstrip in a country nobody in Ashford Bay had ever heard of. Iona had not aged well. She had a bad hip and worse knees and a lung that had never quite recovered from something she did not talk about. But she had all her teeth and all her sense of humor, and when Lena walked into her small office for the first interview, she had risen from her chair with a slow, painful grace and said, "About damn time. I told you it would be. You said someday, Lena. This is someday." "Yeah, I guess it is." The foundation had an office with 4 desks and one window that did not close all the way. It had a coffee maker that only worked if you hit it in a particular place. It had a phone that rang sometimes at 2 in the morning with calls from countries that did not, officially, have working phones. It had, in its first year under Lena's management, relocated 11 families from 4 different conflict regions to 3 different countries, quietly, with no press, with no donors' names, with no interviews. The seed grant, the one that had started the whole thing 3 years before Lena arrived, had come from a shell company whose paperwork nobody could quite trace. Lena had never asked, Iona had never offered, and on the bench, the one in late September, with the leaves beginning to turn and a wind off the river that had an edge in it for the first time since spring, Lena had looked at Roman Vescari and had said very quietly, "Bridgewell." He had looked at her sideways. "Yes." "Since when?" "Since 3 years ago." "You never told me." "No." "Why not?" He was quiet for a moment. He watched the river. "Because I did it before I met you," he said. "And because I did not want you to think, when you met me, that it was a card I was planning to play. It was not for you. It had never been for you. It was a thing I had started to do in a small way for my own reasons, and I did not want you to find out about it because I wanted your yes, when you gave it to me on this bench or on any other bench, to be a yes to me and not to a thing I had done. All right. I'm telling you now because Iona has offered you a job, which is a thing I did not arrange, which is a thing she did by herself because she knows who you are, and because she has wanted you in that office for longer than I have known either of you. I'm telling you now because I do not want you to take that job without knowing where the first dollar came from. I would not be able to sleep, Miss Hart, knowing that you had accepted a position inside something of mine without knowing it was mine." Lena was quiet for a long time. "Is it still yours, Roman?" "No." "No?" "I signed it over 2 years ago, to a trust. The trust is administered by 3 people, none of whom are me, none of whom are related to me, none of whom have ever met me. I receive no reports. I have no vote. I cannot, under the terms of the trust, withdraw funds. I cannot, under the terms of the trust, direct the foundation's work. My name does not appear on any document connected with it. It is not mine. It has not been mine for 2 years. I set it up that way on purpose, so that what it became would not depend on what became of me. And the first dollar came from money I made in ways I am not proud of. And I would like to believe," he said slowly, "that a dollar cannot undo what it was used for when it was bad. But it can perhaps be used for a second thing, and the second thing can have nothing to do with the first thing. And the second thing can perhaps outlive both the first thing and the man who made both of them happen." She looked at him. "Roman?" "Yes, that is not how laundering works." "I know. You don't get to wash the first thing out by doing a second thing." "I know, Miss Hart. The first thing happened. It will always have happened. You don't get to trade it." "I know. I am not your priest, Roman. I am not going to tell you that you are forgiven. I am not asking you to." "Good. I am not asking you to forgive me because that is not a thing you can do. The people who could forgive me are not here. Some of them are dead. Some of them do not know my name. Some of them know my name and will never speak to me, and they are right not to speak to me. And I have made peace with that, Miss Hart, in the only way a man like me can make peace with a thing like that, which is incompletely and at 3 in the morning when I am alone." She watched the river. She took a long breath. "The job," she said. "Is it the job you want me to take?" "The job is the job Iona wants you to take. I have no opinion on the job." "You have an opinion on the job, Roman." "All right, I have an opinion. And my opinion is that you should take the job if you want the job, and not take it if you do not, and that if you take it, You should never once in your life consider yourself obligated to me for it. The foundation is not mine. The money is not mine. The work is not mine. You would be doing Iona's work, and the work of the people who walk into that office, and the work of your own heart, which is a thing I would not try to touch for all the money I have ever made. I have an opinion, Miss Hart. My opinion is that you are the best person in this city for the work. My opinion is also that this has nothing to do with me. She took the job. She did not thank him for it. He did not expect her to. The winter came, and the foundation's phone rang one night in December at 4 in the morning, and a woman on the other end, speaking from a hotel in a city Lena had not been in for 8 years, said a single code phrase that Iona had given her to say, and Lena sat up in the dark of her bedroom with her heart very steady and said, "Go ahead. I'm listening." And she spent the next 6 days working a case that ended, on a Tuesday, with a family of 4 walking off a small plane in a country none of them had ever seen before, safe, alive, with 4 new sets of papers and a place to sleep. She cried a little when Iona called her that afternoon to tell her it was done. She cried the way she had cried on the drive home from dropping Theo at college, briefly, and then she made herself a sandwich, and she went to bed at 8 in the evening, and she slept for 11 hours. In January, André Solovey died. It was not a surprise. He had been, as he had told her, very old. And he had told Roman in September that he would most likely not outlive the autumn, and he had, with the small, dry, precise timing she had learned to expect of him, held on for 3 extra months as a kind of private joke. He died in his bed, in his own country, with his hand in the hand of a younger man he had raised as if he had been his son, and who had, in the last 18 years of André Solovey's life, become in every practical sense his heir. The younger man wrote Lena a letter, in careful, formal English, through a legal channel. The letter was short. It said that André Solovey had asked, in the last week of his life, that she be informed of his passing, and that she be told one sentence, which the younger man now passed to her in full. "My dear, thank you for the girl on the airstrip. I have carried her face in my mind for 17 years. I am taking her with me now. Rest yourself." Alina read the letter in the kitchen of her apartment, alone, standing up, in the late afternoon of a cold January day. She folded it. She put it in a small wooden box her mother had given her when she was 20. She closed the box. She sat down at the kitchen table. She put her face in her hands. She stayed that way for a long time. When she told Roman, on the bench in February, the bench was back in Garrow Park by then, by the duck pond, because they had been meeting long enough that she had started to trust certain places again. He listened without speaking. When she was done, he was quiet for a minute or so. Then he said, very softly, "I'm sorry, Lena." "Thank you, Roman. He was the only person left alive who knew who I had been before I was this." "I know. I am going to miss him in a way I did not know I was going to miss him." "I know." They sat on the bench in silence for a while. A different child in a different coat was being walked around the same pond by a different grandfather. The ducks were fewer again. "Roman," Lena said. "Yes. I have been thinking about something for a while." "All right. I want to tell you a thing, not as your bench partner, not as the associate director of a foundation you once signed the paperwork for. As a person who has watched you for a year and a half. Are you willing to hear it?" "Yes." She turned her head. She looked at him. He looked older than he had looked on the terrace at the Corvelle. Not badly older, just older, in the ordinary way. There was more silver in the temples. The lines at his eyes had deepened. The set of his mouth had changed. He had, she noticed, not for the first time, but clearly now, in the cold light of February, learned how to carry his face at rest in a way that did not look like a threat. "You are not going to be a good man," she said softly. "Roman, I need you to hear this, because you are the kind of man who, if someone does not say it to him out loud, will spend the rest of his life trying to be a good man, and he will fail every day, and every day he will hate himself a little more for failing, and eventually the hatred will eat him." He did not interrupt her. "You're not going to be a good man. You're going to be a man who has done bad things and is now doing some better ones. The bad things will not go away. The better ones will not most days feel like enough. You will wake up at 3 in the morning for the rest of your life with the faces of people you have hurt on the inside of your eyelids. That is the price. That is the only price there is for the life you have lived. And nobody, not me, not André, Not any priest, not any amount of money you pour into any foundation is going to make that price smaller. I need you to accept that, Roman, because if you do not accept it, you will spend the rest of your life trying to pay a debt you cannot pay, and you will break yourself doing it, and that is not useful to me or to the people who need you to be functional and awake. All right. What you can do, what I have watched you do for a year and a half, and what I am telling you now in February is the thing I want you to keep doing, is a small thing, every day, smaller than you think. One decision, one phone call, one man you let leave, one warehouse you close, $1 you send where it can do some good. That is what a life like yours becomes, if it becomes anything. It becomes small decisions made in the quiet over a very long time by a man nobody is watching. Nobody is going to give you a medal. Nobody is going to write your biography. You are not going to be on the side of the angels. You are going to be on the side of the small decisions. And at the end of your life, if you have been very careful and very lucky and very humble, the small decisions will outweigh, not erase, not cancel, only outweigh some of the bad ones. That is the best you get. That is the best anyone gets. He was quiet. Thank you, he said at last. Lena, you're welcome. May I ask you a question? Yes. What is the best you get? For me? Yes. She looked out at the pond. I got small, she said, a long time ago, for reasons that made sense at the time. I have spent a year and a half getting slightly bigger. Not the woman I was at 23. I'm not going to be that woman again. That woman cost my mother her last 2 good years. I'm not going to give any more of my life to that woman. I'm going to be an associate director at a foundation with a bad coffee maker. I'm going to take a phone call at 4 in the morning when the phone rings. I'm going to go to my brother's graduation in 3 years. I'm going to visit my mother's grave on Sundays. I'm going to sit on a bench once a month with a man I did not plan to sit on a bench with. I'm going to be very ordinary, and if I am very careful and very lucky, the ordinariness will feel, at the end, like a life that was mine. That sounds like a good life. It is not going to be a good life, Roman. It is going to be an honest one. That is a different thing. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. I see the difference. A year and a half after that, on a warm evening in early autumn, Lena Hart stood in the doorway of the small conference room at the Bridgewell Initiative and watched 3 young people, 2 women and a man, none of them over 25, eat pizza off paper plates and argue about a resettlement case. The man was making a point badly. One of the women was cutting him off with a patience that would not last the year. The other woman was writing something in a notebook and not looking up. Outside the one window that did not close all the way, the light on the brick wall across the alley had gone gold. Iona came up behind Lena. They are a lot. They are a lot, yes. They remind me of you. They are better than I was. They are not. They are, Iona. They are going to do this work without breaking themselves the way we broke ourselves. They are going to do it and go home to their apartments and have dinners and have children and be okay. That is what we spent our 20s so that they could have. You think that. I think that. All right. Iona smiled, small. I hope you're right. Me too. Iona squeezed her shoulder once and limped off toward her own office. Lena stayed in the doorway a moment longer. The young man in the conference room finally got his point out right. The first young woman nodded. The second young woman wrote something down. They moved on. That night, walking home along the river in the long, warm light, Lena stopped on the pedestrian bridge and looked down at the water. She was 30 years old, almost 31. Her brother was in his second year of college and was calling her, most Sundays, from a dorm room she had now seen 4 times. With a girl he had started to talk about too carefully, the way boys talk about girls they like more than they want to admit. Her mother's grave had fresh flowers on it, because Lena had put them there that morning. Her aunt was alive and well and stubborn and had taken up oil painting in her 70s badly. A woman who had once, many years ago, been called by a different name on an airstrip in a country Lena no longer named out loud was, tonight, somewhere in the world, alive, doing whatever she was doing because of something Lena had done when she was 23 and had been too tired and too scared and too young to know what she was doing. Lena had stopped thinking about that night every day. That, too, was a kind of healing. Roman Vescari was still in Ashford Bay. He was still, by any honest accounting, a dangerous man. His organization was smaller than it had been 2 years ago and larger than it had been last year, and the shape of what it did was, slowly, by small decisions, changing. He did not talk to her about those changes on their benches anymore. He had understood eventually that the bench was not a confessional, and that what happened in his office was his to carry. They talked, on their benches now, about other things. Books he was reading, badly, in a late and clumsy way, because he had not read much when he was young and was trying to catch up. A tree outside his bedroom window that was dying and that he was trying, with a tree surgeon, to save. The particular light in Ashford Bay in October, which he had lived under for 29 years and had, he said, only in the last year begun to notice. They had never touched each other, not in a year and a half, not in 2 years, not in any of the benches. That was, Lena thought, probably the most honest thing in her life. It was a thing she had not expected and did not feel any urgency to change. A bench was a bench. A month was a month. A man was a man. She was a woman. They were, at the end of very different roads, sitting on the same seat for an hour once a month, and talking, and going home. On the pedestrian bridge over the river, in the long, warm light of that early autumn evening, Lena put her hands on the rail, and she thought, not for the first time, that the story she had lived was not the story she would have chosen. If she had been given the choice, really given the choice, with all the information laid out in front of her, at 15 or at 20 or at 23, she would not have chosen the airstrip. She would not have chosen 4 years of being small in a black apron. She would not have chosen a Thursday night in a private room with a Mafia boss looking across a table at her. She would not have chosen a gala in a dress she did not own, or a terrace in the cold, or a bench by a duck pond in a park in January with an old man's death in her pocket. And yet, standing on the bridge, she understood, in the quiet way that only comes to a person after they have stopped trying to understand, that she would not trade any of it either. Not because any of it had been worth it. Worth was the wrong word. The word was hers. She had lived every inch of it, and she had made the choices inside of it that she had been able to make, and she had stayed alive. And she had stayed, most of the time, recognizable to herself. And at the end, she had been given, by a combination of luck and work and other people's kindness and her own stubborn refusal to stay small, a life that she did not have to pretend to want. The river moved under the bridge. The light moved on the water. A week later, on the last bench of that year, she had decided, privately, that she would not take a bench through the winter this time. And she had told Roman so, and he had understood. She said one last thing to him before she stood up to leave. Roman, yes, if I stop coming to benches, I will understand. I am not stopping. All right, I am only telling you that if I did. If 1 month I wrote to say I was not coming back. If I disappeared. If you heard nothing from me for a year. I want you to know now, in advance, that it would not be because anything had gone wrong. It would not be because I was angry. It would not be because of something you had done or had not done. It would be because I had decided, for reasons of my own, that the bench had done what it was going to do. And I would want you to let me go, without following, without finding me, without sending anyone to check on me. I would want you to sit on the next bench by yourself in my absence, and I would want you to understand that what we did here, for 2 years, for 3, for however long it has been by the time I am telling you this, that it was not a debt. It was a thing two people did freely for each other and for themselves. And when it is done, it is done. He was quiet. I will let you go, Lena. Thank you. I would not be able to not look for you. I want to be honest with you about that. I would want to look for you. I would have to choose every day not to, for the rest of my life. I know. I will make that choice. I know. Thank you. You're welcome. She stood up. The September light was slanting through the trees, and a child on the other side of the duck pond was feeding bread to the ducks, which she was not supposed to feed, and her mother was not quite scolding her about it. And a couple was arguing softly about dinner plans by the fountain, and 2 old men on another bench were playing chess. The city moved around them and went on with its evening. Roman stood up too. Miss Hart, Mr. Vescari. They looked at each other for a moment, And then they both, in the same small breath, did something neither of them had ever done on any bench before. They smiled. Both of them. At the same time. Not a big smile. Not a triumphant one. The tired, quiet, almost private smile of two people who had, against the odds and without any of the ceremony that stories usually wrap around these things, arrived somewhere they had not known they were walking toward when they had started. She turned. She walked down the path toward the park gate. She did not look back. Behind her, Roman Viscari stood by the bench for another full minute, his hands in his coat pockets, watching the water, before he finally turned and walked the other way. And that, more or less, was the whole of it. The city of Ashford Bay went on. The Bridgewell Initiative kept its bad coffee maker and got a better phone. Theo graduated eventually and did not take the first job he was offered because he had been raised by a woman who had taught him to ask one more question before saying yes to anything. Iona retired and did not retire, and retired again, and died in her own bed at a reasonable age with her papers in order, which Lena would remember as a mercy. Roman Viscari grew older and quieter, and in small ways that nobody wrote about in any paper, slightly less dangerous, until the day his younger brother, the one who had stopped speaking to him, began speaking to him again, which was a conversation neither of them told Lena about and which she did not ask about. And Lena Hart, who had once, in her 20s, stood on the other side of an airstrip with a 9-year-old girl in her arms, who had come home and got small, who had, on a rainy Thursday in her late 20s, poured wine for a man who had changed the direction of her life, who had walked into a gala in a $90 dress and walked out as herself, who had sat on a lot of benches with a man who had not deserved them and had, perhaps slowly, in small decisions, earned a few. Lena Hart lived and worked and grew older, and was not at the end either a saint or a hero or a woman anyone ever wrote a book about. She was only, in the way that the best of us ever manage, herself, which, as she had told Roman on the second-to-last bench in a park in late September, was a different thing than being good. It was, on any given day, better.